This video is part 2 of a 4-part video series in which the videos need to be watched in chronological order. Links to the other videos are in the description box below this video. It is absolutely necessary that you watch part 1 first. Part 1 is titled Harrison Ford's Copter Crash equals NASA's copter will crash on Mars on April 9th. Make sure you watch part 1 first, this amazing video, and I will leave a link to part 1 in the description box below this video. This will sound very strange, but it is predicted that NASA's helicopter on the planet Mars will crash on April 9th, 2023. The post date that this video is posted proves that this prediction is made ahead of time, as well as does this time-stamped email by Google and this forensic notes document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. And as we can see in this email and this document, this prediction was known and predicted from at least February 20th, a long time before April 9th. This video is an extremely profound and interesting video and is one of the most important videos on this channel. Alright, we're going to begin part 2 by talking a little bit more about this October 31st, 2022 date, before we get into some other completely different things that are also amazing. And so, if you recall, October 31st, 2022 was the day that the National Transportation Safety Board released for the public its report regarding the prophetic helicopter crash on the lava field in Hawaii. And again, this was exactly 23 years after Egypt Air Flight 990 crashed, killing 203 people, which was 4 + 4 days after Harrison Ford crashed his helicopter. So October 31st, 2022 was an extremely prophetic date, and even what I'm about to explain won't be the complete end of the whole story. However, let's get into some more amazing things here regarding October 31st, 2022. Another relevant prophetic sign on October 31st was NASA's astronomy photo of the day. October 31st was Halloween, and the photo was of what is known as the Cosmic Bat Nebula. This prophetic sign involved NASA, space, and flight. The prophetic sign that will be NASA's helicopter crash on Mars will likewise involve NASA, space, and flight. Like the crash of NASA's helicopter on Mars, the Cosmic Bat Nebula sign is symbolism for Satan and his angels being thrown down from heaven to earth at the beginning of the end times period of the Antichrist's rule. The Cosmic Bat Nebula is 1,400 light years away. This sign involving 1,400 light years occurred 4 days before the date 11/4, which hints at 11 times 4 equals 44, and the date 11/4, as was explained, was the day that the S&P 500 stock market index lost 44 points, and the other indexes lost a prophetic number as well, which confirmed that. And again, the S&P 500 hints at the 500th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance, which is the word for Antichrist. And this was the day of the China Red Dragon prophetic sign, which is also Revelation chapter 12, Satan and his angels being thrown down from heaven to earth at the beginning of the end times period, and is also a sign involving flight and space. And this was exactly 14 years after the 44th president was first elected. In the Bible, a 14-year period is symbolism for the end times period, and it is broken into 2 sets of 7 years. The Cosmic Bat Nebula, that is 1,400 light years away, is blocking the light from Nebula 7. Another related sign that occurred on Halloween was the nationally televised Monday Night Football game. The uniforms of Cleveland's and Cincinnati's football teams are orange, black, and brown, Halloween colors. These cities are also both in the 17th state to join the Union. In the Bible, the number 17 is symbolism for the Antichrist. For example, in the book of Revelation, a beast is used as a metaphor for the Antichrist, and the beast has 7 heads and 10 horns, for which the number 17 symbolizes. The Antichrist will serve non-consecutive terms. He will skip the 45th presidency, just like President Cleveland, who was the only president to serve non-consecutive terms. President Cleveland skipped the 23rd presidency, which is why Obama wore jersey number 23. God pairs the numbers 23 and 44 together to confirm the signs and connections and to reveal the identity of the Antichrist, the 44th president, the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 in high school. This prophetic football game that hinted at the president that skipped the 23rd presidency, President Cleveland, is exactly 23 weeks, which is almost exactly 44% of a year, before the date it is predicted that NASA's helicopter will crash on Mars. And this 23 weeks is also 4 times 40 days exactly, and this also hints at the number 44, which pairs with 23. This football game that was played in Cleveland was exactly 23 years after 203 people were killed on Egypt Air Flight 990. 203 people hints at 23. 990 is the 44th triangular number, which makes this another pairing of 23 and 44. And this Egypt Air crash crashed on its way down to Egypt, and this occurred on the 31st of the month. And the 31st chapter in the book of Isaiah begins with, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt," and then goes on to describe the Antichrist in the end times on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The first verse of the 31st chapter in the book of Isaiah is, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt," which is what the date 10/31, October 31st, hints at. The 10 hints at 1, the first verse, and 31 hints at the chapter 31, which is why this exact 23 years connection between these two October 31st dates. The area of the country that is nicknamed Little Egypt, the area over which the path of totality of the Great American Eclipse Judgment Warning sign peaked, is connected to Chicago, the city that symbolizes Obama, with the I-55 highway. In the Bible, Pharaoh in Egypt is a type for the Antichrist, which is why the eclipse peaked over this area of the country nicknamed Little Egypt, which includes Cairo, Illinois, a place that Obama visited as the U.S. Senator and delivered a speech. And right after becoming the president, Barack Obama went down to Cairo, Egypt, to deliver his famous Cairo, Egypt speech in order to tell the Muslim world that America is no longer a Christian nation. The Antichrist Obama is from Chicago, and the I-55 highway connects Chicago to Little Egypt and Cairo, Illinois, as well as Memphis, Tennessee, and Memphis, Tennessee is named after Memphis, Egypt. Memphis, Tennessee is where the king of rock and roll lived in his Graceland estate, which is symbolism for a king's palace, and in this case, the king of rock and roll is symbolism for the Antichrist king, and James Earl Jones, which as was explained in part 1 of this video, is king symbolism, and James Earl Jones was born near Memphis, Tennessee. James Earl Jones was born near Tupelo, Mississippi, which is where King Elvis was born. Also, Martin Luther King Jr. was killed in Memphis, Tennessee, and he was killed by James Earl Ray, which James Earl Jones hints at, and James Earl Ray killed Martin Luther King Jr. just north of Graceland Estate, just outside of Graceland, and in this case, Graceland symbolizes the Temple Mount, Jerusalem, and the King of Kings, Lord Jesus Christ, was crucified just outside of the Temple Mount complex on the north side at Golgotha, and 4 or 5 times in Martin Luther King Jr.'s life, he said that he was bearing his cross and that he knew that this would end with him being killed. He knew that his life was a sacrifice. Today, people make pilgrimages to Jerusalem, and this will especially be the case in the Messianic age when the King of Kings returns and dwells in the temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem for the 1,000 years of peace. And Memphis, Tennessee is known for being a destination for pilgrimages of people on their way to Graceland Estate, the home of the King of Rock and Roll. This is why, right as time expired in the first half of this game, that was exactly 23 years after the Egypt Air Flight 990 crash, Cleveland kicked a 55-yard field goal to make the score 11-0 going into the second half. Because, as I just explained, this 55-yard field goal hints at the I-55, which is symbolism for the area of the country nicknamed Little Egypt. The score 11-0 hints at the number 110 and is a prophetic number in the Bible that symbolizes walls of security collapsing in God's judgment. The number 9 also symbolizes God's judgment, and God pairs the numbers 9 and 110 together to confirm the signs and connections and to point to the 110 stories of the World Trade Center that collapsed and to point to George Washington's walk down Wall Street after his first inauguration. And Wall Street was named after the 9-foot-high wall of security that the Dutch built to keep the British and the Indians out. Egypt Air Flight 990 hints at 9 times 110, and 23 years after 203 people were killed on Flight 990, Cleveland kicked a 55-yard field goal to make the score 11-0 going into the second half. On 9/11, it was Flight 11 with a crew of 11 people that flew into the Twin Towers that looked like a giant 11 in New York State, the 11th state to join the Union. And the World Trade Center is symbolism for the Tower of Babel story in the book of Genesis, chapter 11. This is because Jesus coined the phrase the 11th hour, which in ancient Israel referred to the last hour of daylight before darkness, and in English is an idiom that means last chance, time is running out. In other words, the events of 9/11 were a last chance warning for America to repent and turn back to God before judgment destruction. On 9/11, 2 planes struck the 2 towers that looked like a giant 11, and 11 divided by 2 equals 5.5, and this is why Cleveland kicked a 55-yard field goal to make the score 11-0 going into the second half, as the second half hints at the number 2. The kicker that kicked the 55-yard field goal to make the score 11-0 wears jersey number 3. This was kicked on October 31st, the date 10/31, and the date 10/31 hints at 2 1s and a 3. 11 points and player number 3 also hint at 2 1s and a 3. This is to hint at the number 113. Additionally, it was this rookie's second spectacular kick of the season. He began the season with a 58-yard field goal kick. He kicked a 58-yard field goal and a 55-yard field goal, and 55 plus 58 equals 113. This is because God is pointing to the 113th word in Strong's Concordance, which is the Greek word meaning lawless, wicked, unrestrained, unprincipled men. In other words, this prophetic sign is a 9/11 judgment warning that America is lawless and wicked and will soon be led by the lawless one, the Antichrist. There is much more to this, though, with this pointing to 113. It would take time to prove this to you, but God is also using combinations of 2 1s and a 3 to hint at not only the 113th word, as I just explained, but also the 131st word. The 131st word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance is the word meaning blood disease. And again, this October 31st date with this sign, October 31st in itself is a pairing of 3 and 2 ones. The date 1031 gives us 1 and 31, 2 ones and a 3, which hints at 131, blood disease. And so this date here, October 31st, with this sign that I just explained pointing to 113, is also hinting at 131, blood disease, and this date is 37 days after NASA flew its helicopter, and again, October 31st was the helicopter sign. The National Transportation Safety Board released its report for the public regarding the prophetic helicopter crash in Hawaii. This helicopter sign on this date was 37 days after September 24th, 2022, and the day that NASA flew its helicopter for 55 seconds, which I'll explain why that's significant in a second. And this day, this helicopter flight was very, very unique in that on the flight, the camera underneath the helicopter recorded, as it's looking down on the surface of Mars, a very strange dangling piece of debris from one of the legs of the helicopter. The comments from NASA on the Wikipedia page, or its status update page rather, say that NASA, the scientists were confused as to what this was, and they were going to take some time to analyze this and see if the helicopter was all right, because the debris ended up dangling on the bottom of the leg of the helicopter for a while, and it's very strange. What in the world is this piece of debris doing there? It's Mars, after all. There shouldn't be debris like this on the planet Mars. It looks like a piece of plastic or something waving in the wind. Anyway, NASA's flight, a helicopter, didn't fly for over a month, I believe, after that, which was highly unusual. And I thought at the time it was because they were still looking into what in the world was this. Probably that was why they didn't fly it for very long. But the point is that this is all symbolism for looking down through a microscope and seeing the debris in people's blood that have taken the mark of the Antichrist. And so that's what's symbolized there with this helicopter on Mars looking down with its camera onto the surface of the red planet Mars. It's symbolism for looking at red blood, looking down into a microscope. Anyway, that was also why, and there's more to it I'll explain, but that's also why this 113 here. The reason for the 37 days between this flight of NASA's helicopter on September 24th and October 31st, the day of the other helicopter prophetic sign, and this field goal kick that is pointing to the number 113, as I just explained, the 11-0 kick score by player 3. The reason for the 37 days is because this hints at 3 sets of 7. In the book of Joshua, who died at the age of 110, Joshua, led the Hebrews around the walls of security of the ancient city of Jericho for 3 sets of 7 times over 7 days, while 7 priests blew 7 trumpets. And so this is 3 sets of 7 in the account of Joshua and Jericho, and that's what 37 days hints at. Furthermore, it connects with an 11-0 sign. The score 11-0 hints at 110, and Joshua died at the age of 110. And 37 days back gets us to September 24th, and the other sign we received on that day was the news story regarding Chicago, Barack Obama, the Chicago White Sox baseball manager, Tony La Russa, and how he wouldn't be returning, which hints at Obama returning to the White House. He wouldn't be returning for the rest of the season. And there's much more to this, which I can't go off onto explaining in this video. That's a whole other video in itself. It's so much involved in it. But this hints at, well, the number 22 is his jersey number, which is, again, the number of symbolizing the mark of the Antichrist. But Tony La Russa is used because he was the manager of the Oakland Athletics that won the 1989 World Series and were a part of the World Series earthquake prophetic sign. The extremely prophetic sign in the League of 9/11, the 1989 World Series earthquake prophetic sign, one of the biggest of all prophetic signs. I wouldn't put anything really in the category of 9/11, but it was one of the biggest of all prophetic signs. And Tony La Russa was the manager, and that is earthquake symbolism. Furthermore, as explained in other videos, the sign in that sign is 55 because the two pitchers involved in the pre-game, right when the earthquake happened, the ABC broadcast was talking about the previous two games, and the two pitchers, which they were saying were the key to the two other games, and their jersey numbers added up to 55, and God uses pitchers on the pitching mound to symbolize the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. This was game 3, exactly 333 months before the prophetic Temple Mount sign on July 17th, 2017, and on and on and on and on. But anyway, the point is that La Russa is earthquake symbolism, and the walls of security collapsed in Jericho due to an earthquake. And 37 days after, La Russa and this NASA debris on the helicopter sign is the other helicopter sign, and this sign involving 55 yards and 11-0, which hints at 110, and Joshua, which all is for the purpose of pointing to this number 113 and the date 1031 to give us the 131st word, which is the word for blood disease. And you get the point here. We're talking about the mark of the Antichrist. Oh, and the reason why Tony La Russa, whose jersey number is 22, which is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist, the reason why he wouldn't be returning is because he is 77 years old, and it's because of his health, which also is pointing or hinting at the mark of the Antichrist and people's health. And this was the 33rd anniversary of the 1989 World Series earthquake, which was all about the number 33, because right at the moment of the earthquake, the ball had just bounced off the wall in the outfield with the number 330 on the foot sign, and it was game 3 and 333 months before and all that. And right very at the moment of the earthquake, player number 33, Jose Canseco, was crossing home plate. Anyway, this was the 33rd anniversary of the 1989 World Series earthquake, and Tony La Russa is 77 years old. And 77, and that's the point of the story, is because he wasn't returning because of that, because of his health. And 77 plus 33 is 110. So 110 plus the 37 days, which is 3 sets of 7, which is Joshua, so is 110, gets us to the 11-0 score, which is 110. Also, Tony La Russa is 77 years old in this sign because 77 is 7 times 11. And this is because this hints at Genesis 7:11, which is the beginning of the flood judgment. Noah's flood began in chapter 7, verse 11, and that's the reason for 77 years old here, is because the 1989 World Series earthquake was a judgment warning, as was 9/11, the warning before the actual judgment, destruction, which is symbolized in Tony La Russa's age now, which means the judgment destruction is beginning now. This is also, by the way, the reason for Flight 77 on 9/11. The first 2 flights flew into the Twin Towers, which were the judgment warning. The third flight flew into the Pentagon. That was Flight 77, which hints at 7 times 11, which hints at Genesis 7:11. And that flight is hinting at the flight of Kamala Harris, who will fly from Washington, D.C. This Flight 77 on 9/11 flew from Washington, D.C. It was a flight bound for Los Angeles, and it returned and then flew into the Pentagon. It made a loop. And likewise, Kamala Harris will depart on her Air Force Two plane from Washington, D.C., bound for Los Angeles, and then will crash in St. Louis, where the path of totality of the Great American Eclipse peaked, and then passed over the area of the country nicknamed Little Egypt, and peaked over Little Egypt. The path of totality peaked over Little Egypt, which is just past St. Louis, and it was right after the eclipse passed over St. Louis. And that is relevant because that is also what her flight will symbolize and why she will crash in St. Louis. And the path of totality of the upcoming eclipse will pass over the path of totality of the eclipse in 2017, exactly where it peaked, over Little Egypt, including Cairo, Illinois. And in this Tony La Russa sign on September 24th, the day that NASA's helicopter flew and the mysterious debris was on its leg, on this day, the interim manager took the place of Tony La Russa and spoke with the press, the media, regarding the story regarding Tony La Russa and how he wouldn't be returning. This was some sort of other assistant manager, I forget. Maybe he was a base coach or a batting coach, I forget. But this coach's name that stepped up and became the interim manager of the Chicago White Sox, his name is Michael Cairo. That's right. His name is Cairo. And as has been explained here, all of this is Egypt symbolism, including the 55-yard field goal, as I just explained, on October 31st, 37 days after Michael Cairo, because of the I-55 highway connecting to Little Egypt and Cairo, Illinois, and Memphis, Tennessee. And so that's amazing. It's Michael Cairo. And again, it was Archangel Michael that is throwing the red dragon down from heaven to earth in Revelation chapter 12. And again, the crash of NASA's helicopter onto the red planet Mars is hinting at this red dragon in Revelation chapter 12. And again, the date of this football game was the date of the report, the NTSB report regarding the Bell 407 helicopter, which hints at 11, 4 plus 7 equals 11. And again, the prophetic sign in this football game was this field goal that was kicked as time expired into the second half, which made the score 11-0. And so we have two number 11s in the prophetic signs on October 31st. And again, it is 31 days, which is the 11th prime number from this October 31st date and these signs to the date of the urgent warning report from the NTSB regarding the Bell 407 helicopters. These warning signs occurred on the 31st day of the month. The Antichrist is described in the 31st chapter in the book of Isaiah. This chapter begins with, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt." Right after becoming the president, Obama went down to Egypt. Obama is from Chicago, and the area of the nation nicknamed Little Egypt is connected to Chicago with the I-55 highway. This 55-yard field goal was kicked on the 31st of the month, and exactly 55 days after the 31st flight of NASA's helicopter on Mars. On its 31st flight, the helicopter flew for 55 seconds for the first time. This was on Martian day 550 in the helicopter's mission, and it was also exactly 55 months after SpaceX launched a red Tesla Roadster into space at the same time that Elon Musk was talking about going to Mars, which was symbolism for the red dragon and the rider of the red horse, which the Bible uses as a metaphor for the Antichrist. Furthermore, SpaceX missions into space are called Dragon missions, and SpaceX astronauts are called Dragon crew, and they use what is called a Dragon capsule. Also, in God's signs, he is using helicopters as symbolism for dragons, and is using this to point to the red dragon in Revelation chapter 12. More regarding this will be explained as this video series progresses. It was said that the dummy in the red Tesla flying through space, which again is symbolism for the Antichrist riding the red horse, was listening to David Bowie music. And David Bowie and his music is Antichrist symbolism, and the iconic image of David Bowie with the lightning bolt over his right eye is hinting at Zechariah chapter 11 verse 17, which describes the Antichrist and the issue with his right eye. The lightning bolt is the symbol of the Antichrist. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus said that he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven, and Barack Obama's name in Hebrew means lightning from heaven. Barak is the word for lightning, Bama is the word for high place, which in the Bible is a metaphor for heaven, and O in the language that Jesus would have spoken, Aramaic, is the word from. Hence, Barack Obama is lightning from heaven. Either Jesus didn't know what he was saying, or he knew that there would be a famous president named Barack Obama and said this anyway, even though it would confuse us, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist. Obviously, the latter option is the only option that makes any sense, and therefore this is 100% proof that the Antichrist is Barack Obama. The fall of Kamala Harris in a plane crash from the sky and then her replacement with the Antichrist is symbolized by Luke 10:18 when Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. Also, Tesla, the company Tesla, is symbolism for electricity and lightning. And this is also why God uses Tesla in his signs as symbolism for Luke 10:18 and the Antichrist. And Nikola Tesla is famous for his lightning experiments. At the time of the red Tesla launch, Elon Musk was talking about how it was possible that the dummy in the red Tesla would encounter aliens. This is because the truth about aliens and UFOs is that they are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. And this is part of what is symbolized in Revelation chapter 12 when the red dragon is thrown down from heaven to earth along with his fallen angels. The coming alien deception will be in fact this, when Satan is thrown down from heaven to earth with his angels and pretend to be aliens and UFOs. In this prophetic football game, the score was 11-0 going into halftime, and it was 11 days before the date 11/11, which was the day that President Trump, God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet and highlight his prophetic signs, and is symbolism for when the Hebrews blew trumpets before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment. Hence why the border wall of security is synonymous with Trump's presidency. And this is why on 11/11, Trump tweeted in his Truth social media post that America is falling, which was symbolism for the walls of security falling. And 11 days and the date 11/11 is symbolism for the 11th hour, which Jesus coined, which in ancient Israel referred to the last hour of daylight before darkness. And on this 11/11 date, the 11th of November, 2022, Trump said that America is falling in context of what had just happened in the 48th state, Arizona, because the 48th president will be the Antichrist, Barack Obama. And what Trump was referring to that had just happened in the 48th state involved a candidate named Lake, because in Bible prophecy it is said that the Antichrist, the dragon, will be thrown into the lake of fire. President Trump is Book of Joshua symbolism when the Hebrews marched around the walls of security of Jericho before they collapsed, fell in God's judgment. Joshua led them, and he died at the age of 110, which is what the score 11-0 hints at. It hints at 110, which is why this score 11-0 was 11 days before the 11th day of the 11th month, and Trump's prophetic post regarding America falling. This date 11-11 is in the trail of signs leading to the day it is predicted that the helicopter will fall onto Mars, which will symbolize when the red dragon and his fallen angels were thrown and fell from heaven to earth. And the dragon is symbolism for the Antichrist. And this date 11-11 was 66 days after the helicopter's flight for 55 seconds on Martian day 550. That date was September 6th, which is 9/6, and hints at 6 divided by 9 equals 0.666, which is Antichrist symbolism, and also the number 66 is the 11th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 11th row is 66. Which is the reason for this prophetic connection of 66 days from the date 11-11 to the date that symbolizes 0.666. It is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash due to a bird strike. This will symbolize when Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. It is through her death and replacement that the Antichrist will return to power. Her fall from the sky in a plane crash will symbolize when Jesus said that he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. This is also what will be symbolized when NASA's helicopter will fall and crash onto the red planet Mars. The day NASA officially announced its moon landing sites, and the day that SpaceX's Dragon cargo ship descended to Earth was August 19th, which was 7 days and then 17 days after the extremely prophetic, historic, and destructive flooding in the city of St. Louis, Missouri. In the account of Noah's flood in the Bible, God gave Noah a 7 days warning to load the ark. After this, the flood began in Genesis 7:17, and then Noah's ark came to rest on Mount Ararat in the 7th month on the 17th day of the month. In other words, this 7 days and then this 17 days count is one reason why the trail of prophetic signs leading to the day that NASA's helicopter will crash goes through August 19th, 7 days and then 17 days after this prophetic flooding. The same day as this extremely prophetic, historic, and destructive flooding in St. Louis, sudden extreme weather caused Class A damage, which means $2.5 million or more in damages to 10 helicopters at the naval base in Virginia. 4 of these helicopters are named Sea Dragon helicopters. They are used to hunt sea mines. The emphasis in the news story was placed on these Sea Dragon helicopters because the Navy only has 30 of them, and there is no plan in place for new ones. The prophetic sign that occurred on August 25th, which symbolized the red dragon being thrown down from heaven to earth, is part of the trail of signs that is leading to the crash of NASA's helicopter, the prophetic sign on August 25th, which was NASA's photo of the day, which was a unique perspective of the moon and the transit across the moon of the new space station of China, which is known as the Red Dragon, which symbolized the red dragon described in Revelation chapter 12 that is thrown down from heaven to earth and is pointing to the crash of NASA's helicopter. This sign on August 25th occurred 30 days after the damage to the Sea Dragon helicopters, and the Navy only has 30 of them, and this damage was done to these helicopters exactly 30 months after basketball star Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter crash. In the Bible, a period of 30 years is symbolism for a king, and the Antichrist king is the basketball president. This is the reason for this connection of 30 days to the 30 Sea Dragon helicopters and 30 months to the death in a helicopter crash of the basketball star. In the account of Noah's flood, the flood waters increased for 40 days. 40 days after this extremely prophetic, historic, and destructive flooding in St. Louis, on the same day as the Sea Dragon's helicopter's prophetic sign, was the day that a plane crashed into Mutiny Bay in Puget Sound near Seattle. For 2 days after this, there was a helicopter search by the U.S. Coast Guard. The helicopters were searching for 9 people, and the number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel as from the Bible, the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. In its crash, the plane made a near vertical descent into Mutiny Bay, and it was discovered that it was because of a malfunction to its tail. It will be explained further in this video series how God is using helicopters as symbolism for the dragon that is described in Revelation chapter 12 that is thrown down from heaven to earth, which is why this plane made a near vertical descent from the sky into Mutiny Bay. And an important aspect of this dragon that is described in Revelation chapter 12 involves its tail. The plane crashed into Mutiny Bay because this dragon in Revelation chapter 12 is thrown down from heaven with his angels. This dragon and his fallen angels were thrown down from heaven to earth after they committed mutiny in heaven. In Bible prophecy, 2,520 days is symbolism for the end times period, and 2,520 hours, which is 105 days, after this plane crashed into Mutiny Bay, which again is symbolism for the red dragon being thrown down from heaven to earth. 2,520 hours after this were the prophetic signs that occurred on December 18th that are related and point to the day that NASA's Mars helicopter will crash on the red planet Mars, which will symbolize when the Archangel Michael throws the red dragon down from heaven to earth in Revelation chapter 12, which will be on April 9th, exactly 16 weeks, which is 4 times 4 weeks, which hints at 44 and the 44th president Antichrist, after the prophetic signs that occurred on December 18th. The prophetic signs that occurred on December 18th include the number 16 and the number 44. Hence why the 16 weeks, and which is also 4 times 4 weeks connection. The signs on December 18th also included the football team, the Raiders, which is symbolism for the red dragon and his angels being thrown down from heaven to earth in Revelation chapter 12. This is like a raid of earth, if you will. It's like pirates raiding, like the Raiders, which is also what the crash of NASA's Mars helicopter on the red planet Mars will symbolize. And these signs on December 18th were 44 days after the date 11/4, which hints at 11 times 4 equals 44, and the day that the S&P 500 lost 44 points. And again, this was explained in the part 1 of the video series, but the S&P 500 is symbolism for the Antichrist because the 500th word in the Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance is the word for Antichrist. And on 11/4 was the day that China's rocket fell uncontrollably to Earth. China is the red dragon. And so China's rocket crashing uncontrollably to Earth is symbolism for the red dragon being thrown down from heaven to Earth. In other words, God pointed to December 18th in regards to this NASA helicopter crash on Mars, the crash of Mars's helicopter, the prediction of it. And this isn't even scratching the surface for how God pointed to December 18th. And again, on December 18th, the signs included the number 16 and 44, which confirms the 4 times 4 weeks, which is 16 weeks connection from December 18th to April 9th, the predicted date that NASA's helicopter will crash on Mars. All right, so what happened on December 18th was astounding. There was a football game involving the New England Patriots, the most important sports team in God's prophetic signs, and sports are a very big deal in God's prophetic signs. God communicates a lot of prophetic information through prophetic sports events. The Patriots is symbolism for America, and New England is symbolism for the spiritual founding of America with the crossing of the Pilgrims. And that game was against the Las Vegas Raiders. Las Vegas is symbolism for Sin City, and this game was in Las Vegas. And the game came down to the last 3 seconds. The score was tied at 24-24. And the Patriots had the ball on their own 44-yard line. All right, so that's the 44 right there. But there was a very wild play that ended the game that became a national sports news story, because the game should have gone into overtime and was about to go into overtime, but the Patriots made a colossal error, or one of the players, and that player, his jersey number is 16, which is 4 times 4, which is confirmation of the 44-yard line, the beginning of this prophetic play. The player 16, in a moment of not thinking very clearly, as you'll see in this clip here, threw the ball back to no one, except the only player in the vicinity of where he threw the ball was a player for the Raiders, player number 55. Player 55 caught the ball and then plowed over the quarterback and ran into the end zone untouched. And the end zone is symbolism for the end times, and the end of the end times, and the Antichrist in the end times, and the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ in the end times, at the end of the end times, which will be in 2024, which is why the score was tied at 24-24. Also, 24 to 24 hints at 24 plus 24 equals 48. The Antichrist, the 48th president, Barack Obama. Also, this prophetic play that began on the 44-yard line was a play with 3 seconds left remaining in the game, which hinted at a third term for the 44th president. Raiders player 55 ran into the end zone with the score at 24-24 and then won the game. And 24 plus 20, which hints at 24 plus 24 equals 48. The 48th president in the end times, but also 48 days back from player 55 running into the end zone was the day of the prophetic 55-yard field goal, which was explained in great detail in part 1 of this video series, which is another football game. And so these two football games connect to each other with 48 days, and that's confirmed with the score at 24-24. But also, the day of that prophetic football game with the 55-yard field goal was the day of the prophetic helicopter sign. The National Transportation Safety Board released its report on that day regarding the helicopter crash in Hawaii, which is explained in great detail in part 1 of this video series. And so that's connecting to this day, December 18th, which is again a relevant prophetic sign in the trail of signs leading to the prediction for the crash of NASA's helicopter on the planet Mars on April 9th. And when that happens, it'll confirm everything that I'm saying in this video is true. The reason why this player was number 55 is because, again, as explained in part 1 of this video series, this hints at the I-55 highway. And, well, as was explained before, the helicopter flights involving the number 55, but that's ultimately also hinting at the I-55 highway. And the I-55 highway is ultimately a sign pointing to the Temple Mount, because the I-55 connects Chicago, the home of the Antichrist. That's a symbolic reason. It goes through St. Louis, where Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, which will lead to the rise of the Antichrist through her replacement. Barack Obama will become president again. And then the I-55 goes down to Memphis, Tennessee. And that's why I-55 points to the Temple Mount, because Memphis, Tennessee is all about Graceland, King Elvis's estate. King Elvis is symbolism for the King of Kings that will dwell on the Temple Mount in the Messianic age, but also the Antichrist king that will be on the Temple Mount that will be defeated by the return of Lord Jesus Christ. But this is Graceland. And this is also, by the way, Martin Luther King Jr. was killed just outside of Graceland, which is just to the north outside of the Graceland estate, which is hinting at how Jesus was crucified just outside of the Temple Mount complex on the north side in Golgotha. And Martin Luther King Jr. predicted that his time with his movement would end with him being killed. He said 4 or 5 times that he saw what he was doing as bearing his cross. And so he made a sacrifice. He knew that he was a sacrifice. And so that's also symbolism for the sacrifice that Jesus made. And people make pilgrimages to the Graceland, and that's symbolic of the pilgrimages that people make and will especially be making in the end in the Messianic age after Jesus returns to Jerusalem, to the Temple Mount. So that's the reason for the I-55 and the connection to the Temple Mount, and also and that's why Player 55 ran into the end zone. But also, if you recall, the prophetic kick, the 55-yard field goal that was kicked on the same day as the prophetic helicopter National Transportation Safety Board report prophetic sign on October 31st. And there's more reasons, prophetic reasons for 55. It also does hint at Revelation 5:5 and Daniel chapter 5, verse 5. Revelation chapter 5:5 is arguably the symbolic beginning of the end times when the Lion of Judah unrolls the scroll. And that's why there are these lion signs on December 18th as well. One of them being the quarterback for the Lions, player number 16. Also, this was the day that the famous lion in Los Angeles was euthanized, or the story was how he was euthanized was in the news on this day. And that lion, his name is P22. P is the 16th letter. 22 symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist. And again, the reason for the number 16 is because it is 4 times 4, which hints at 44 and identifies the 44th president as the Antichrist. And so the famous lion, P22, was euthanized. And so P16, 44, mark of the Antichrist, 22. And so if we can think about what is a euthanization, how is it administered? How is it put inside the body of the lion? And you get the idea of what the mark of the Antichrist is. And so, anyway, there's much more to this. I don't want to talk about it too much here because I want to keep the momentum here going with the connections to the helicopter crash. So the lion sign will be explained, and it already is explained in another video. This was also the day of the turbulence flight from the 48th state to Hawaii, and this is also another story altogether too. But it's all related because 48 and the score 24-24. But returning back to confirming the connection of 16 weeks from December 18th, we have the player 16, we have the Lions player 16. And the reason for the Lions player 16, by the way, is that the Lions had won 6 games out of their last 7, which was shocking for the sports world because the Lions have been a perennial loser and for many years, and for them to do that, it hinted at 1967 when the Jews took back the Temple Mount, and 2 men named Lion. Their names, I forget their status in their military, but these 2 men named Lion entered through the Lion's Gate of the Temple Mount, the old city, and took the Temple Mount in 1967, and that's why the Lions quarterback. Also, the end zone. And so that's the Antichrist on the Temple Mount in the end zone. in this play. So, okay. I should add that the two men named Lion were the two leaders of the military troop, the small group of people, men that first entered the Temple Mount after, and they were the first ones. And so they were and they led them through the Lion's Gate. Also, this quarterback for the Lions, player number 16, which again hits at 4 times 4 and 44, the 44th president. This Lions quarterback was also the quarterback in Super Bowl 53, and 53 is the 16th prime number. He was with a different team. He was with the Rams, and it was the extremely prophetic Super Bowl between the Rams and the Patriots. And that's explained many other times in other videos. But that was a 9/11 sign because, it was 17 years after the Super Bowl that Tom Brady won, the first one with the Patriots, right after 9/11, which was also against the Rams. And the Rams are from Los Angeles, and the Patriots are from Boston, and the two flights from Boston to Los Angeles rammed into the two towers on 9/11. And it was 17 years, and that Super Bowl, the first one, is known for the last-minute winning drive that was started from the Patriots' 17-yard line with the score 17-17, which was hinting at the 17 minutes in between the two planes that struck the two towers on 9/11. This Super Bowl was right after 9/11. Well, anyway, the turbulence plane that left the 48th state on the way to Hawaii that injured 30 people, and 20 people were taken to hospital when the plane landed. 11 of them critical condition and 9 of them stable condition, which was 9/11 symbolism. This was the day of this quarterback sign who was involved in this 9/11 Super Bowl. And that Super Bowl, another 17, Tom Brady went into that Super Bowl with 17 Super Bowl records, which confirmed the 17 years to that Super Bowl from his first Super Bowl win right after 9/11. And him and the coach, Bill Belichick, had been in 9 of the 11 Super Bowls that the Patriots had been in. Anyway, there you have it. I think I've explained it enough the Raiders. This is the most important part. The reason why it connects with the helicopter is that the Raiders is symbolism for the red dragon being thrown down from heaven to earth with his angels in Revelation chapter 12. And as I have explained many times, the helicopter, when it crashes, will be symbolism for when the dragon is thrown down from heaven to earth with his angels. And that's also why the lion was euthanized in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is Spanish for the angels. And again, this Raiders play, this Raider run into the end zone was the end of this prophetic play. This play began at the 44-yard line, and this Raider player was thrown the ball from the Patriots player number 16, which hints at 4 times 4. And again, this is all confirmation of adding the 16 weeks, which is 4 times 4 weeks, exactly from December 18th and this prophetic play to the date it is predicted that NASA's helicopter will crash on the red planet Mars. All right, I had to go off onto a tangent to explain the prophetic signs on December 18th. I want to bring us back now to the connection to the plane crash in Mutiny Bay on September 4th. And again, the connection to December 18th from that plane crash into Mutiny Bay is 2,520 hours. This is extremely important. And so hopefully you can recall what I was mentioning earlier about the plane crash into Mutiny Bay, and let's continue. One thing before we continue here, the connection to the Raiders sign. Again, Raiders is symbolism for the dragon being thrown down from heaven to earth with his angels when they commit mutiny in heaven. And so that is the connection between the Raiders sign and this plane crash in Mutiny Bay. The main reason why the helicopter search, which was prophetic, the U.S. Coast Guard national symbolism, for that matter, this was also in Washington State, which is also national symbolism. The reason why they were searching for 9 people is because the most central prophecy in the Bible is Daniel chapter 9. The Daniel chapter 9 prophecy describes a period of 70 weeks. Each of these weeks is 7 years. They are biblical years, and a biblical prophetic year is made up of 12 months of 30 days each. The 70th week in this prophecy is 7 years, and 7 times 7 biblical years is 2,520 days. The 70th week of the 70 weeks in the prophecy is 2,520 days, and the 70th week in this prophecy is symbolism for the end times period of the Antichrist's rule. And in Revelation chapter 12, the red dragon that is thrown down from heaven to earth is at the symbolic beginning of this end times period, which is why when NASA's helicopter will crash on the red planet Mars, it will be symbolism for the beginning of the end times period. NASA's helicopter will crash on Mars exactly 16 weeks after player number 16 threw the ball to the Raiders player on December 18th, and December 18th is in turn 2,520 hours, which is the equivalent of 105 days, after the plane crashed into Mutiny Bay. What is absolutely astounding is that the plane crashed into Mutiny Bay, which is also symbolism, again, for when the dragon is thrown down from heaven to earth. It crashed exactly 69 weeks after China, which is known as the Red Dragon, its rocket crashed uncontrollably to Earth. This was the first time that the rocket of China, which is the Red Dragon, its rocket crashed uncontrollably to Earth. It was a big news story. The 4 times that it has happened have all been news stories, and the 4th one was also prophetic too, in terms of God's picture of timing. And the first time that it happened was exactly 69 weeks. This is obviously symbolism for the red dragon being thrown down from heaven to earth at the beginning of the end times. And the end times in Daniel chapter 9 begins after the 69 weeks. And so 69 weeks after China, the red dragon, its rocket was thrown down or fell uncontrollably to earth, was the day that the plane crashed vertically after the tail malfunction into Mutiny Bay, and then 2,520 hours, which is symbolism for the 70th week, were the prophetic signs that pointed to the predicted date that NASA's helicopter will crash onto Mars. And so we have this beautiful connection from the day that the Red Dragon, China, its rocket crashed uncontrollably to Earth. It connects with the day that NASA, or the predicted date that NASA's helicopter will crash onto the red planet Mars. And it is connected with 69 weeks and then 2,520 hours, which is a complete symbolism for Daniel chapter 9 and the 70 weeks prophecy, which is made up of 69 weeks, followed by the 70th week, which is 2,520 days, which is why this 69 weeks period followed by this 2,520 hours period. And what makes this exponentially even more astounding is that this midpoint, the end of the 69 weeks and the beginning of the final 2,520 hours in this connection, this midpoint prophetic sign, which was the float plane crash into Mutiny Bay, was a tourist plane carrying tourists from a tourist island named The Rock. The island is named The Rock. I think it's its real name. It might be its tourist or nickname, but it's called The Rock. In the news stories, they referred to it as capital T, The Rock, capital R, and that's its name. And rock in the Bible is symbolism for Jesus. In this most central prophecy in the Bible, after the 69-week period, is the first coming, the arrival of the Messiah. That is what's described in this prophecy. The Messiah arrives after the complete 69 weeks, which is 69 times 7 years. And then there is a pause in the prophecy of 2,000 years before the final 70th week and the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ at the end of the 70th week. But at the beginning, or the 70th week, is the period of the end times period of the Antichrist's rule. And that's why it's astounding that this sign in the middle at the end of the 69 weeks is about these tourists that were returning from this tourist island named the Rock. And rock is symbolism for Jesus. And Jesus arrived after the complete 69 weeks in the prophecy and will return at the end of the 70th week. And that's why from this plane crash that crashed after visiting the Rock, it is 2,520 hours, which is symbolism for the 70th week, the end times tribulation period of the Antichrist's rule. More regarding this plane crash into Mutiny Bay will be explained later in this video series. Also, this date, at the end of this trail you are seeing here that I'm talking about, the end of this 70th week, this date is December 18th, which is 1218, and 12 divided by 18 is 0.666. And in Bible prophecy, the number of the Antichrist is 666. And that's also why this is astounding here. And on this day again were the Antichrist signs, including this Raiders sign. This Raiders Patriots sign that began on the 44-yard line, which hints at the 44th president, the American Antichrist, which is why this game was played against the New England Patriots. The Patriots symbolize America, and New England symbolizes the spiritual founding of America, with the Pilgrims crossing, who were escaping religious and political persecution, just as the Antichrist will persecute America's Christians and God's faithful. Okay, at this point, it's time to explain this truly amazing diagram here. And let's just dive right into it. Let's begin where we have already explained a few things. So here we have the date that it is predicted that NASA's helicopter will crash on Mars. There is a strong possibility, I think, that it will be its 49th flight. That's one reason why it would be on the date 49. Although I learned that the trails of signs that God is presenting was pointing to this date before I considered the fact that it could be the 49th flight. And so, in other words, that would be just confirmation. And it's quite possible because as this is being recorded, we are at 47 flights and we are a month away. But I concluded at least another month before this that it could very well be the 49th flight, which would make sense. Now, as was just explained, this date is exactly 4 times 4 weeks, which is 16 weeks after this player 16, the Raiders sign. The Patriots player 16 threw the ball to player 55. The play began at the 44-yard line. It was the day of the turbulence flight. Ultimately, as was explained in part 1 of this video series, the crash of NASA's helicopter is also connecting with 82 days to the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. That's a very big reason for this prophetic sign. It will be a sign that will be part of a trail, a major sign that's pointing to the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash. And that's why this turbulence flight, the flight that left the 48th state, Arizona, on its way to Hawaii with 11 critically injured and 9 in stable condition, 9/11 symbolism, as I explained. Anyway, that'll be explained more too in another video. So anyway, that was 4 times 4 weeks. And again, this was in turn 2,520 hours, which is symbolism for the 70th week after the plane crashed into Mutiny Bay, which involved helicopter searches, which is why it's part of the helicopter trail of signs here. One reason, and also the reason too, of course, is that it's symbolism for Revelation chapter 12 when the dragon is thrown down from heaven to earth after their mutiny in heaven. And that's what the crash of NASA's copter on Mars will symbolize when it crashes onto the red planet. And in turn, this was 69 weeks. Again, this is symbolism for the 70th week. This is 69 weeks after the day that China's rocket crashed uncontrollably to Earth, and China is the red dragon. Now, this in turn here, all of this is exactly 23 months. That's amazing because God uses 23 months connections, because the number 23 is one of the three most important numbers, one of the most important numbers that God uses in his signs. And it is the 9th prime number. It symbolizes judgment, just like the number 9 does. And that's explained many times. But what confirms God's signs? So God's big picture of signs works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter. And that's what makes it true and not a product of one's imagination. That's why this diagram, for example, these are all second witnesses to each other. And it's an interconnected web. But one major way in which he confirms his signs with second witnesses, which, by the way, is what the Bible says is required to confirm a matter, the second and third witnesses, is pairing numbers together, such as 9 and 23. And again, 23 is the 9th prime number. There are many reasons for why he pairs 9 and 23 together. One being is that the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 became president in 2009. The mark of the Antichrist is described, or the inverse of it, is described in Ezekiel chapter 9. And the mark of the Antichrist involves chromosomes, which are DNA, which is made up of 23 chromosomes. Anyway, this 9th of the month pairs with this 23 months to this 9th of the month. And this is a second witness to this trail right here. So that's an amazing second witness. Now, as I was just saying, this could be the 49th flight for the helicopter on the date 49. The 49th prime number is 227. This is one reason why this number is prophetic. Also, mathematicians, for shorthand, refer to the number pi, which is God's number, creation number that he has baked into his creation, if you will, pi, baked. The shorthand for it is 22 divided by 7. That's the closest approximation we can get to pi, which is 3.14 and digits that go into infinity, transcendental number. So anyway, pi is known as 22 divided by 7. That's another reason for 227. But 49 is a very prophetic number. It's 7 times 7. And even in this 70 weeks prophecy, this 69 weeks is broken up into 62 weeks and 7 weeks. And the 7 weeks is, in fact, in the prophecy, 7 times 7. So anyway, so 49, the 49th prime number back, we get this date, which I'm about to explain and was mentioned briefly earlier. But this was the day, I think it was mentioned earlier, maybe not. This was the day that NASA's photo of the day was a prophetic sign. God uses sometimes NASA's photo of the day. This is one of them. On this day, NASA, as its photo of the day, presented a unique picture, photograph of the moon, an image of the moon, a unique one. I forget the details of why it was unique, but it's some kind of special way of presenting the image of the moon. But in the center of the picture is the transition of China's new space station across the moon. China, again, is the red dragon. This space station, the vehicles that China uses to get its astronauts to the space station are called Dragon shuttles or Dragon craft or something. So there's even dragon name in China's space station, and China is the red dragon. And the moon symbolizes Christ, and watching the moon symbolizes watching Christ and watching for the signs of his return. That's why we watch the moon. And anyway, so the moon is very prophetic too for this reason. And this is a picture of the moon. It's watching the moon and the space station of China transitioning, making a transit across the moon. I'll show that either right here or in a minute. Obviously, you should see the picture. So this in turn was 30 days, and I explained this already, after the day of the Sea Dragon's helicopter sign, and NASA only has, the Navy only has 30 of them, which is why 30 days, and that was the day of the damage to them, as it was explained, on the same day as the St. Louis flood, as was explained. And as was explained, this is in turn exactly 30 months after the death of Kobe Bryant in a helicopter crash, which departed just after 9 a.m. and killed 9 people. The number 9 is God's number, the most important number that symbolizes God's judgment. Now, let's see, let's just continue here, because Kobe Bryant, he's number 24, and he wore Lakers jersey number 24. This is because the dragon will be thrown into the lake of fire on the Day of Atonement in 2024 at the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ. And that's why Kobe Bryant wore jersey number 24. And why he played for the Lakers, the Los Angeles Lakers. Los Angeles, of course, is the fallen angel symbolism here too. And again, God uses helicopters to symbolize the dragon and his angels that are thrown down from heaven to earth. That's why Kobe Bryant played for Los Angeles, and he died in a helicopter crash in Los Angeles. It was amazing symbolism for the angels being thrown down from heaven to earth. And he died in a high place. He died on a mountain. And that's why it connects with exactly 69 weeks to this date here, which was all about these high place signs. Why high place? Because the 1117th word in Strong's Hebrew Old Testament Concordance is the word Bama, which means high place. And in the Bible, first of all, the high place in the Bible was a euphemism for the Jews' worship of false gods, false idols on the tops of mountains. But also in the Bible, the high place is symbolism for heaven. And Jesus said in Luke 10:18 that he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. And the word barak in Hebrew means lightning. And O in Aramaic, the language Jesus would have spoken, is from. So lightning from heaven, barak o Bama. And that's why this connection is these signs here, these mountain signs are 11 months and 17 days to this date here, which I'll explain. So anyway, that's why Kobe Bryant died on a mountain and connects with these mountain signs, which includes the cable car that crashed on the mountain in Italy on May 23rd, 2021. This was also the day of the Ryanair hijacking, which was in a high place. The Belarusian Air Force intercepted this Ryanair plane that was on its way from Athens to Lithuania, Vilnius, which is known as the Athens of the North, nicknamed Athens of the North. Ryan, because in Irish, the name Ryan, it means king. And this is end times return of the king sign, Antichrist king sign as well. And the reason why the Belarusian Air Force intercepted the plane is because there was a dissident from Belarusia on the plane who had developed, he was the developer of the social media site that is used by people to criticize the government. And so this guy, the government wanted him, and that's why they hijacked the plane just to get that guy. But Athens is known as the cradle of democracy. That's why he was flying to Vilnius, the Athens of the North, and he was symbolism for free speech, which is what the Antichrist king will crack down on, which is why he was on Ryanair. Okay, and so also the media reported, it was in every story, I think even in some of the headlines maybe, that he was going to get 15 years in prison. That's because 15 people died on the cable car crash, and it fell from, I believe it was 15 meters, I believe. But there was another 15. But anyway, it pointed to 15 days later and the signs that occurred on June 7th, which is explained in another video. So anyway, also this was the same day, another mountain sign, which was the day of the tragedy on the mountain in China, in the marathon. There was a marathon underway on top of a mountain at the time that this freak storm rolled in and killed people. And there are some prophetic numbers. I apologize, I forget. I've explained it before in another video. Probably, I'm sure, the same one as the one that explains the 15 days. Oh, the 15 days gets us, by the way, to the release of Apple iPhones iOS 15. And the big thing about it was the development of the Apple Wallet, the ability to upload one's identification, which is, of course, part of the mark of the beast, and the enforcement of the mark of the beast that will make sure that you have taken the thing. That's controversial. Okay, and so that's why 15 days to the iOS 15. But there were more signs, including the sinkhole in the parking lot of the hospital in Jerusalem, which is astounding because, of course, the Antichrist will be in Jerusalem and will make Jerusalem an international city, and he'll be on the Temple Mount. And the hospital, well, that hints at what the mark of the Antichrist is on the day of the iOS 15 release. It's astounding. All right, another sign. This was all, by the way, Pentecost. Okay, this was Pentecost in the true calendar, which watches for new moons, and it was May 23rd, and so it's a prophetic date in itself for that reason. And but why this is relevant here is because of this other mountain sign on Pentecost here, which was the eruption of the volcano in Nyiragongo in Congo. And it's in a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and God has used this particular site, including these abductions of and shootings of tourists, as United Nations Antichrist signs, which is explained in other videos. It's really, really, really in-depth. There's lots to it. I couldn't even begin to go off onto that tangent. But it occurred on Pentecost, and on the first Pentecost, when the Hebrews were at Mount Sinai, fire came down, fire and smoke came down on the top of the mountain. And this mountain's name, Nyiragongo, in the native language, means which smokes. And that's why it occurred on Pentecost. All right, now, so this is probably relevant, but the volcano, there were 31 deaths, and this was in Africa, and Isaiah chapter 31 begins with, woe to those who go down to Egypt. Egypt is part of Africa. It's also part of the reason why God has been using these signs of this Congo park, because it's UNESCO and it points to the Antichrist who was born in Kenya, Obama, and is from Africa. Okay? So, but what's also relevant here too is, I didn't include it here, but this was the day that the 50-year-old Phil Mickelson won the PGA championship at the age of 50, and Pentecost, this was on Pentecost, and Pentecost literally means 50th. Okay, it means 50th day. And so that's why it was astounding that the 50-year-old, and the world was shocked that a 50-year-old could win the PGA, and he won it on that day, Phil Mickelson. That's because it connected with exactly 4,000 days after the death of Michael Jackson at the age of 50. And 4,000, in the Greek New Testament, Strong's Concordance, the 4,000th word is the word for 5,000. And Jesus fed 5,000 people and sat them down miraculously, and sat them down in groups of 50. That's what it says in the text. He sat them down in groups of 50 and he fed 5,000. That's why 4,000, which means 5,000 days, exactly after Michael Jackson died at the age of 50, to the day that Phil Mickelson won the PGA Tour on the day that means 50 at the age of 50. Now, Phil Mickelson hints at Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson hints at Phil Mickelson, right? Michael Jackson. Now, the reason for all of that is because, well, how did Michael Jackson die? He died after receiving something into his arm. You know what I'm talking about. He got something put inside him, and that's what killed him. That's the symbolism in this connection. And why is this relevant? Well, as I just explained, this connects to the iOS 15 for one thing, but also This is very, very important. This is huge. Phil Mickelson won the PGA Championship Tour on the golf course on the coast, like literally on the coast of South Carolina, which is symbolic, just south of Charleston. And the path of totality of the Great American Eclipse exited the U.S. just exactly where this golf course is, like Charleston and this golf course, a 70-mile wide path of totality. And that's part of the reason here, because as explained earlier, in part one, the two paths of the eclipses cross over each other and engender an X, which is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist. Okay, and so that's why Phil Mickelson ties to Michael Jackson, who died after getting a thing in his arm, and why it's this golf course, which is part of this eclipse symbolism that's pointing to the mark of the Antichrist. But this is so amazing. This victory of his on this golf course was exactly 82 weeks after the GOAT, greatest of all time, and in the Bible, GOAT is Antichrist symbolism, the GOAT of golf, Tiger Woods, won his 82nd PGA Tour, becoming the GOAT. He tied the other guy, but the other guy did it in a completely different era, and I think he golfed more, from what I remember. But anyway, regardless, he became the GOAT, and it was this particular golf course in Japan, and it was exactly 82 weeks, and he won his 82nd tour. So it's golf course connecting to golf course. But the reason why, now I've explained the Phil Mickelson, why it's prophetic, but the reason why Tiger Woods' championship win was prophetic, more than the fact that it made him the GOAT, which is enough, really, but there's a reason for all of this. And I'll just begin by also saying that this particular tour in Japan, it's the only PGA tour, tournament that is in Japan. And it is an official PGA Tour part of the tour. And on this golf course, prior to the day that Tiger Woods won, was the day of a prophetic typhoon that caused flooding on the golf course, which caused the tournament to be delayed by a day because of this flooding caused by a typhoon, which was put there by God to create this flooding, which was Noah's flood symbolism, judgment symbolism, and it occurred a prophetic exact 110 days after the flooding in Washington, D.C., that flooded the basement of the White House where the media has their offices, because the media is wicked and evil, the mainstream media, with their lies, their constant lying, and also flooded the Pentagon. And the Pentagon is also evil because the COVID has been a DOD military operation that has been many years in the making. So anyway, so this flooding also confirms the prophetic significance of this championship for Tiger Woods. But this particular golf course is the only place in the entire world where there is a microbe, an organism, a microscopic bacteria, a microbe that is only found on this particular golf course in Japan. And this microbe was discovered by a scientist and obviously a golfer who, while he was golfing, collected the soil sample. And this scientist won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of this compound that is derived from this one particular microbe that only exists on this one golf course. This compound that was discovered is the compound of Ivermectin. I'll spell it out again. Ivermectin. That's correct. God demonstrated through the victory of Phil Mickelson on Pentecost at the age of 50 that God's cure for COVID is this compound that's derived from the microbe on the golf course in Japan. Okay? Case closed. If you believed the propaganda regarding it being a supposed horse something something, I'm sorry, you need to stop watching the mainstream media. It is 100% lies about all of this related stuff. Okay? And also, it is the mark of the Antichrist because I just proved it in a number of ways. And again, it's 15 days to the iOS 15 and also connects to Michael Jackson, etc. All right. So I really went off onto a tangent there, but I think it was worthwhile. This is also explained in the Tiger Woods videos, which you need to watch. There's much more. Okay, so watch the Tiger Woods videos. It's very important. The video titled with the Tiger Woods in the title, okay? All right, so now, this 11 months and 17 days again hints at the word Bama, which means high place, and this is the high place signs, okay? And this day here was the National Transportation Safety Board report regarding the helicopter crash in Hawaii, the state that Obama is from. This was a major sign on December 26th, 2019, which I explained in other videos. It's astounding, the sign, but this was the day of the statement released regarding the helicopter. They made a statement. They were also calling for a meeting, but this was May 10th. Okay, and so we had, and this connects to with 117 days, which also hints at the 1,117 word Bama, high place. This connects to these Sea Dragon copter sign on the St. Louis. So full circle right there, okay? Also, 117 is 9 times 13, and which is symbolism for judgment from the Antichrist, because from the Bible, the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment, and the number 13 from the Bible symbolizes the Antichrist. So 9 times 13 equals judgment from the Antichrist. Nimrod, a type for the Antichrist, was the 13th generation from Ham. Haman, another type for the Antichrist, persecuted the Jews on the 13th days of the month. And the two Antichrists are described in the book of Revelation in chapter 13. Okay, so let's go back now to the crash of Kobe Bryant, because this in turn is exactly 666 days to the day that China's space lab made an uncontrolled crash to Earth. It wasn't the space station, it was a space lab. I guess it was like the first space station, but it was just a space lab. So anyway, China is the red dragon. And again, helicopters are symbolizing dragons. And so this is an amazing 666 days because, of course, 666 in Bible prophecy is the number of the Antichrist. This was the same day that the Pope Francis, for the first time in 600 years, exercised his power to change the date and the law, which in Daniel chapter 7 says the Antichrist will do. It says in Daniel chapter 7 that the Antichrist will seek to change the laws and the dates and the times. Well, this is exactly what happened. The Pope, because this April 1st, 2018 was also Easter, April Fool's Day, which is a Catholic day, he canceled it and made there be 2 April Fool's Days in 2019, the following year. All right, this was the end of exactly 69 weeks from the day that the Israeli Knesset decreed that Jerusalem would be rebuilt, which was in turn exactly 62 times 7 years from the day that King Suleiman the Magnificent decreed that the walls of Jerusalem be rebuilt, which, if you followed that, 62 49 years. This date for 2018 was exactly 49 years, which is 7 sevens. So 60 times 7 between Suleiman the Magnificent and the decree on 4/1 in 1969. And then 7 times 7, which to this date here in 2018 gives us the 69 weeks, which was symbolism for the beginning of the 70th week, which is part of the many symbolism signs from mid 2017 to early 2018 that symbolized the beginning of the final 7 years. That's why the Lord is returning in 2024, for example. Okay, we are already well inside the 7 years. Many of you that believe you know some things about Bible prophecy will be shocked to hear that. I understand. Okay, I didn't get it for a while at first either, that we would be going this far. I never expected it, but it is true. It is only symbolism. And God overwhelmingly demonstrated this throughout these signs here, but also throughout the last years. Okay, and furthermore, the prediction being made in this video will prove this. That is the purpose for this prediction. One of them is this: the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove to you that we are already well inside the symbolic 7 years. Okay, that's the purpose of the prediction. It's also to prove that what I just said here about what is the mark of the Antichrist is fact. End of debate. There is no more discussion, no more speculation. It is the mark of the Antichrist. This is the purpose for the prediction. I can't state it enough. If you still want to disagree, I've warned you, okay? You don't get it. That's the purpose of the prediction, okay? Sorry to speak so boldly, but it must be done because I know many of you will not get it unless you are explained clearly what is going on with this video and why God is making this prediction. Okay? So anyway, this date here was exactly 6,666 days after this date, which was the Y2K Doomsday, which was all about the changing of a date. That was what the Y2K Doomsday was all about. It was the controversy, the scare over the changing of a date. And it connects with 6,666 days to the day that the Pope changed the date. And in Daniel chapter 7, that the Pope, it says the Antichrist will change the times and the law. The Pope exercised his power in the law to change the times and the date. And it in turn connects with another 666 days. In other words, there is no debate. End of controversy. The Protestants knew this at the time of the Reformation, and there wouldn't have been a Reformation had they not known it. It's very, very clear from Scripture as well in prophecy, but if you didn't get that already, know now that the reason for the prediction being made in this video is to prove to you that Pope Francis is the Antichrist. Case closed. You have misunderstood 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Paul is not talking about the Holy Spirit. Enough with the guessing game, because it's been clear from Scripture all along. The supposed, we can't know the identity of the Antichrist till supposedly he steps on the Temple Mount or something like that. It's nonsense. Okay, and so also he is the first Antichrist. He isn't the false prophet. That's just a metaphor. Just because he's religious. Furthermore, Scripture clearly says that the Antichrist is first apostate, a deceiver, a religious deceiver, and then is a political actor. Okay? So the second Antichrist is Barack Obama. He gets his power from the first Antichrist. Furthermore, the second one in Scripture is obviously the more active one, and Pope Francis is very old. Okay? He gets his power from the alien of deception that's coming. The aliens are going to make him the world ambassador, and he will become the leader of the United Nations, etc. And that's where Barack Obama will get his power from. Okay? All right. So, now, this date here, this was rapture symbolism, because for one thing, this date was known ahead of time. Let's see. This date was known ahead of time. This date was known ahead of time. This date was known ahead of time. Obviously, this one is known ahead of time. These two dates were known ahead of time. This date was known ahead of time, and so was this one. Okay? So anyway, in other words, I predicted these dates and for prophetic signs. One of the reasons I knew, which wasn't the first reason, but this date is 726, which hints at the 726th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance, which is the word for rapture, which is what will occur to God's faithful next May on Pentecost, May 26th in true Pentecost, in the calendar that watches for new moons. On May 26, 2024 will be the day of the rapture, 5 months before the second coming. Anyway, that's why 726 days back from this day with the Sea Dragon's copter sign was the day of the launch of NASA's helicopter. It's amazing. 726 days connects with the day 726 and helicopter signs here. And it was launched with the probe named Perseverance, which is prophetic because the Bible talks about the perseverance of the saints, including those that persevere until the rapture so that they can be raptured. Okay? I skipped this. 2 months and 16 days. That hints at 216, which is 6 times 6 times 6, 216. Also, Barack Obama was born on the 216th day of the calendar year. 2 months and 16 days is also 110,880 minutes, which is amazing because 110 is prophetic, one of the most important numbers, and that is 880 is 8 times 110. And on 9/11, the heroes of the 88th floor, the signs of 9/11 pointed to George Washington, and according to Wikipedia, there are 88 places in America named Washington, and the two towers were replaced by the Tribute in Light art installation, which was made up of 88 searchlights. In other words, God was pointing to George Washington, and 88 symbolizes that. And it was 110 floors, and that's why 800 times 110 is 880. Anyway, this is 9/11 symbolism, in other words. Anyway, and that connects to this sign right here. But back to this, and this July 30th, 2020 date. This was the day that Herman Cain died, the former presidential candidate who is known for his 999 tax plan. That's extreme judgment symbolism because the number 9 is God's judgment, the most important number in his signs. It symbolizes God's judgment. Cain also symbolizes God's judgment from the story of Cain and Abel in the Bible. And what I didn't or forgot to write here was this was the day that the podcast between Barack Obama and Bruce Springsteen was recorded, the podcast named Born in the USA, which is very, very prophetic because, of course, one of the biggest lies in all of history is his lie that he was born in America. Okay? I'm sorry if that's news to you and you believed the brainwashing from the mainstream media that never vetted Barack Obama at all. And that's why, by the way, in 2008, before I was born again, before I was really into prophecy like I am today, I knew even back then that, it was the election of the first black president, but I also said to others as well, to friends, it was also the day of the election of the last president. And I was shocked to see him leave office and Trump come into office, but since then I've learned that he's returning to the office and he will in fact be the last president. And one of the reasons why I knew that in 2008 is because, it was clear that he wasn't born in America. The sheriff and the biggest, and the media didn't care about that and didn't care about many of the things of his past. He was a radical leftist from the most corrupt political city in America, Chicago. Raging leftist with really radical background and political ideas, and so anyway, and this guy can't become president of America, but only with the brainwashed liberals that fawned over this guy because he was a good talker and he was black, which reveals the values of America, which people get the leaders and the form of government that they deserve. And America clearly didn't deserve democracy anymore after they elected Barack Obama. Clearly. And that's why he was the last president. And so anyway, that's where we're headed. But so anyway, the sheriff of the 6th biggest county in the U.S., Phoenix, Maricopa County, because no one else would do it, he conducted an investigation into Barack Obama's birth certificate, long form, that was only presented in digital form. And he sent it to two forensic labs in Europe, independent labs. And it clearly came back that there was 9 points of obvious forgery. It was clearly a obvious layered document that was forged. And the woman that from the Hawaii Health Department that signed off on all this, she died mysteriously in a plane crash. I mean, the plane crashed into the ocean and she was the only one that died. Whether or not that's a conspiracy, I tend to think it probably isn't. But it very well could be, because she had that knowledge. Anyway, that's very prophetic, because she died exactly 7 years before December 11th, 2020, which was the VACC something something day, when it was first declared emergency use something, right? And the Trump big speech about it in the Oval Office, etc. Exactly 7 years. And of course, as I have explained, 7 years in Bible prophecy is symbolism for the end times. And the Antichrist will return to the president's office because of a plane crash. And that's why this woman, the department head of health in Hawaii, that played along with the forgery, died in a plane crash. Exactly 7 years before that. So, okay. So here, this was again, this date was rapture symbolism. Okay. Now it was flood symbolism. And in the account of Noah's flood, Noah and his family were rescued in their ark, and it was lifted high up above the earth, as it says in the text, which is why it is rapture symbolism, because those that will be raptured will be taken up into the clouds, as it says, and they will be rescued. Okay. So that's what the ark symbolizes. This was flood symbolism. And in Bible prophecy, in the book of Revelation, the number 144,000 is symbolism for those that will be raptured. And so that's why it's exactly 144,000 minutes, which is 100 days, from this rapture sign to this rapture sign to this rapture sign. This was the day that NASA began its rollout of its Artemis 1 launch system onto the launch pad. And 7 days later, it was hit by Hurricane Nicole on the launch pad. In the account of Noah's flood, God gave Noah a 7 days warning to load the ark. Artemis is a spaceship, a spacecraft. It's symbolism for the ark. 7 days later, after it was rolled out onto the launch pad, symbolizing the 7 days warning, was the day of Hurricane Nicole, which is symbolism for the flood. The highest wind speeds of Hurricane Nicole were recorded at Kennedy Space Center. Kennedy, by the way, also is symbolism for Robert Kennedy Jr., who is God's prophetic voice regarding the truth about the something, the things, and also hints at how Kamala Harris will die while in office, just like John F. Kennedy. That's explained elsewhere, too. So there's way more to this date, which is explained in other videos, and I've already explained a lot regarding this in part 1 of this video series. And this, in turn, is 150 days, and after the 7 days, the flood lasted for 150 days. It's astounding. So from the flood, which is rapture symbolism, because of this connection here too, okay, also born in the USA, born into heaven. Cain was the first man born, by the way. That confirms the born in the USA sign there too. Cain was born, Adam and Eve weren't. Cain was the first man born in the USA, birthed into heaven, 726 days. The birth into heaven, by the way, comes from Revelation, the symbolism in Revelation chapter 12, to the date that symbolizes the rapture, on the flood that symbolizes the rapture, 144,000 symbolizes the rapture, to the Artemis 1 spacecraft, which symbolizes the ark and the rapture, 7 days warning in the account of Noah's flood, and then 150 days, which follows the 7 days in the account of Noah's flood, to the day that NASA's helicopter is predicted to crash on the red planet Mars. Also, 150 days is 3,600 hours, and 36 is 6 times 6, but also 2 times 18, which is 6 times 6 times 6, or 6 plus 6 plus 6. Also, the 36th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 36th row is 666. And 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, all the way up to 36, equals 666. And again, 216 is 6 times 6 times 6, and that's why this is also 216,000 minutes, this connection. And so there you have it. I've explained the entire diagram here. Phew. The prophetic sign that was NASA's photo of the day, which was the unique depiction of the moon, With China, the Red Dragon, its new space station making a transit across the moon, was a Red Dragon Revelation chapter 12 prophetic sign. That is why this sign occurred 12 days before the day that the U.S. Coast Guard helicopter search was called off on the date 9/6, which hints at 6 divided by 9 equals 0.666. On the same day of NASA's 31st flight on Sol 550, when it flew for 55 seconds, 55 days before the date it is predicted that NASA's helicopter will crash on the red planet Mars, which will be symbolism for the red dragon being thrown down from heaven to earth that is described in Revelation chapter 12. In the Bible, a goat is Antichrist symbolism. In a minute, I will explain how the prophetic sign on August 2nd, the death of the GOAT, greatest of all time, of baseball broadcasting, Vin Scully, whose son died in a helicopter crash, is the important prophetic sign in the middle of this 7 days and then 17 days between the extremely prophetic, historic, and destructive flooding in St. Louis and the day of the NASA moon sign and SpaceX dragon sign, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6 days before the date 9/6, which hints at 9 divided by 6 equals 0.666, which was the day that the U.S. Coast Guard helicopter search was called off on the same day as NASA's 31st flight on Sol 550 when it flew for 55 seconds, 55 days before the predicted date that NASA's helicopter will crash. This extremely prophetic, historic, and destructive flooding in the city of St. Louis is Noah's flood symbolism. There is too much to explain, and so it will be explained in another video, the prophetic significance of the extremely prophetic, historic, and destructive flooding in the city of St. Louis on July 26th. I will just say here that the iconic symbol of St. Louis is its gateway arch. St. Louis is known as the gateway to the West, and in the Bible, God's judgment on a people symbolically begins at the gates. As a result of the flooding, the Gateway Arch National Monument was officially closed by the National Park Service. As well, God is using St. Louis as symbolism for the extremely prophetic Great American Eclipse Judgment Warning sign in 2017, the path of totality of which went directly over St. Louis, the biggest city in the U.S. that the eclipse path traversed over. St. Louis was located at the center of the eclipse, right near where the eclipse peaked, starting at 1:17 p.m., which hinted at the Antichrist coming to power during the 117th Congress, which began in January of 2021, and the peak of the eclipse lasted for 160 seconds, which hints at 16, which is 4 times 4, which hints at the 44th president Antichrist. The path of totality of the Great American Eclipse was 70 miles wide, and one of the biggest aspects of the news story regarding this flooding was the closure of the I-70, Interstate 70 highway in St. Louis, which happens to run parallel with the 70-mile-wide path of totality of the Great American Eclipse. The extremely prophetic, historic, and destructive flooding in St. Louis occurred exactly 600 plus 600 plus 600 days after the Great American Eclipse path passed over St. Louis. 600 plus 600 plus 600 days hints at 666, which is Antichrist symbolism, and as was explained earlier, the Great American Eclipse was in turn exactly 3,000 days after Barack Obama went down to Cairo, Egypt, and the Great American Eclipse peaked over an area of America nicknamed Little Egypt. In the account in the book of Exodus in the Bible, after the Hebrews were delivered from Egypt, 3,000 souls perished in God's judgment, hence why the 3,000 days connection. In the account of Noah's flood, Noah was 600 years old at the time of the flood judgment, and that is why this eclipse path went over St. Louis exactly 600 plus 600 plus 600 days before the extremely prophetic, historic, and destructive flooding in St. Louis. In the account of Noah's flood, the 7 days warning was then followed by 40 days of increasing flood waters. This is why it is predicted that 7 days and then 40 days after the extremely prophetic, historic, and destructive flooding in St. Louis, to the day of the extremely prophetic flooding in the city of Chicago, which included the prophetic signs on the flooded historic Soldier Field and a football game involving the Chicago Bears. The prophetic significance of these signs are much too much to be explained in this video, and they are amazing and profound and will be explained in another video. St. Louis and Chicago are connected by the I-55 highway, and it was explained earlier the prophetic significance of the I-55 highway, and the I-55 highway and the I-44 highway converge and merge into one highway briefly right at the Gateway Arch, right next to it in St. Louis, and the 44th president is from Chicago. And so this is confirmation of the prophetic significance of not only the flooding in St. Louis, but also the connection of the I-55 highway to Chicago, the home of the 44th president. And the flooding in St. Louis connects to the flooding in Chicago. In the account of Noah's flood, God gave Noah a period of 120 years warning before God said that he would begin his judgment on man and destruction on the world. From the prophetic flooding in Chicago and flooded historic Soldier Field, it is 1 month and 20 days to the day that NASA's helicopter will crash on Mars, and 1 month and 20 days hints at the number 120 and 120 years. Also, one of the major signs in the flooded historic Soldier Field is the Chicago Bears sliding, which made a national sports news story, them sliding in celebration of their victory at the end of the game. And this was symbolism for the fallen angels that are thrown down from heaven at the beginning of the end times period, as described in Revelation chapter 12. These angels are thrown down from heaven along with the red dragon, and this is why it is relevant also why that this Chicago Bears sliding crash fall sign connects to the day that NASA's helicopter will fall and crash on the red planet Mars. On April 4th in 2016, on the date 4-4, which hints at the number 44, during a baseball game, the GOAT of baseball broadcasting explained the acronym GOAT and how it stands for greatest of all time. This in fact became a national news story. It was ironic how the GOAT of baseball broadcasting explained the pop culture term GOAT. Vin Scully was explaining the batter's story of his encounter with the GOAT of basketball at a shoe store. The GOAT of basketball being Michael Jordan, who wore jersey number 23. The 44th president, the basketball president, and GOAT Antichrist also wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school. This is why the GOAT of baseball broadcasting explained the term GOAT on the date 4-4, which hints at the number 44 and the 44th president. At the time, Scully was 88 years old. 88 is 2 times 44, which hints at the second presidency of the 44th president and return to the White House of the basketball president and GOAT Antichrist. The GOAT Antichrist is from Chicago. In a ceremony at the White House later that year, in November of 2016, a few months after the GOAT of baseball broadcasting explained the term GOAT, The GOAT Antichrist awarded the Chicago Bulls GOAT of basketball Michael Jordan the Medal of Freedom, and also awarded the GOAT of baseball broadcasting the Medal of Freedom. This was just days after the Chicago Cubs finally broke their curse of the Billy Goat sports curse. At the time that the GOAT of baseball broadcasting explained the term GOAT, he was in his last and record 67th year of broadcasting for the Los Angeles Dodgers. A big part of Scully's story is how he broadcasted for 67 years. It's what makes him the GOAT. The number 67 hints at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, which was captured by the Jews during the Six-Day War on the date 6/7 in 1967. 67 is 6 and 7, and it symbolizes the unification of man with God. God, as Jesus, will dwell with man in the Messianic age in the 1,000 years of peace and will rule from the Temple Mount. Man was created on the sixth day, and the number 7 is God's signature number, indicating his divine touch upon something. In ancient Israel, 2 goats were used in the ritual on the Temple Mount on the Day of Atonement in the Hebrew calendar. The 2 goat antichrists, Pope Francis and Barack Obama, will be defeated and vanquished from the Temple Mount at the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ on the Day of Atonement in 2024. In Bible prophecy, the number 666 is symbolism for the Antichrist, and the 2 antichrists are described in the last and 66th book in the Bible. The date that the GOAT of broadcasting explained the term GOAT on the date 4/4 in 2016 was the 66th anniversary of the UN Trustee Council's decision to recommend that Jerusalem be made an international city on the date 4/4 in 1950. When the world will soon make Jerusalem an international city, it will be the biggest transgression against God's will as described in Bible prophecy. The Antichrists will preside over the UN body that will enforce this international status for Jerusalem. This is why the GOAT of baseball broadcasting explained the term GOAT in his last and 67th year of broadcasting. The GOAT was explaining the story of the batter at the time and his encounter with the GOAT of basketball at a shoe store.
John Jay had a big thrill. He was in a shoe store buying some shoes, and who came in? Michael Jordan, and he probably bangs it into left field. Up with it there is Carl Crawford. Jay a big turn and holding with a 2-out single. And when he talks about meeting Michael Jordan in the shoe store, he refers to him as the GOAT. And you say, GOAT? Why is Michael Jordan GOAT? No, he said, GOAT, greatest of all time. You ever heard that? Well, that's what John Jay brought to the dance, GOAT. All right, a 2-out single, and here's Derek Nars.
In ancient Israel, the Jews would conduct a ritual sacrifice on the Day of Atonement involving a goat, which is a prophetic foreshadow for the defeat of the GOAT Antichrist on the Day of Atonement at the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ in 2024. The batter's number was 24 because the Antichrist will be defeated on the Temple Mount at Lord Jesus Christ's second coming in 2024. God uses pitchers on the pitching mound to symbolize the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. The pitcher on the pitching mound at the time that the GOAT of baseball broadcasting explained the term GOAT was player number 22. The number 22 is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist, which Bible prophecy says will be used by the Antichrist and Antichrist system to persecute God's people. The inverse of the mark of the Antichrist would have been the Tav mark described in Ezekiel chapter 9. The letter Tav is the last and 22nd letter in the Hebrew alphabet. The mark of the Antichrist is described in the last and 22nd of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. Again, in this video clip that you are watching, the batter is the person that the GOAT of baseball broadcasting is talking about, who said that he met the GOAT of basketball in a shoe store. In this video clip that you are watching, it is pitcher number 22 on the pitching mound, which is symbolism for the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. And again, this day is exactly 66 years after the UN Trustee Council voted or submitted its report officially to make Jerusalem an international city. And the Antichrist will be on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem in the end times and lead the body, the UN body that will make Jerusalem an international city. But this 66 years is why this player number 22 pitched to this batter that hit the ball into the outfield. And as you can see in this video clip, there is an error going on with the outfielder, player number 3. He can't see the ball. In other words, it's deception. In other words, many people, most people will be fooled by the Antichrist. They will think he is a good guy, when in reality he's working for Satan and is a bad guy. That's the symbolism in the not being able to see the ball, the deception. He is player number 3 because this pitch was pitched by player number 22, and 22 times 3 is 66. The mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book of the Bible, the 66th book in the Bible. This Antichrist is also described in this book, in this same chapter as the mark of the Antichrist, with a number that is 666. This is why player 22 to player 3, 22 times 3 equals 66, which confirms the 66 years to this day that the GOAT of baseball broadcasting explained the term GOAT on the date 4/4, which hints at the 44th president who will serve a third term, which is why the player number 3 in the outfield, it is also hinting at the third term for the Antichrist. Taking the mark of the Antichrist, which is the snakebite thing, will lead to genocide, which is why the GOAT of baseball broadcasting explained the term GOAT through a story about Michael Jordan, while the pitcher number 22 was pitching 22 years after the only Major League Baseball game that the GOAT of basketball, Michael Jordan, played in. It was an exhibition game between the Chicago White Sox and the Chicago Cubs that ended in a tie score of 4-4, which hinted at the 44th president from Chicago. Jordan hit the RBI that made the score 4-4. This was the same day that the Rwanda genocide began. It was exactly 23 years before Trump launched missiles into Syria in response to the use of chemical weapons, which was an act of genocide. God frequently pairs the numbers 23 and 44 together to confirm the signs and connections and to reveal the identity of the Antichrist, the 44th president, the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school. That's why from the day that the GOAT of basketball, who wore jersey number 23 for Chicago, played this baseball game that ended up being tied 4-4 and hit the RBI that tied the game at 4-4 in Chicago, where the 44th president is from, and the day of the Rwanda genocide, it is exactly 23 years to Trump's missile launch that was in response to an act of genocide. The 44th president, Antichrist, will be the leader of a genocide. Trump launched the missiles into Syria in response to an act of genocide in 2017 on his 77th day in office. It was 77 days after his inauguration, and on his inauguration day, Trump was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old, after having won the election by 77 electoral votes. And on the day of Trump's election, the leader of Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, had been in office for 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days. The reason why Netanyahu had been in office for 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days on the day that Trump won by 77 electoral votes, and why on the day of Trump's inauguration, Trump was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old, is because in the book of Revelation, in Bible prophecy, there are 3 sets of 7 judgments from God. And 7 of these judgments are trumpet judgments. Also in the book of Joshua, Joshua led the Hebrews around the walls of security of the ancient city of Jericho before they collapsed in God's judgment after the Hebrews had marched around 7 times over 7 days while 7 priests blew 7 trumpets, which is 3 sets of 7, which is why Trump is God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet and highlight his prophetic signs, and why Trump's presidency trumpeted the coming judgment from the Antichrist that will lead a civil war genocide. Archaeology proves that the walls of security of the ancient city of Jericho collapsed due to an earthquake. The GOAT of baseball broadcasting died on August 2nd, the date 8/2, which was in turn exactly 370 days after the 8.2 magnitude earthquake in Alaska in July of 2021. This was the 7th largest earthquake in U.S. history. Again, the walls of security collapsed on Jericho due to God's judgment from an earthquake after the Hebrews marched around the walls 7 times over 7 days, while 7 priests blew 7 trumpets, 3 sets of 7 judgments. 370 days hints at 3 sets of 7. And this connects the 7th largest earthquake, an 8.2 magnitude earthquake, to the death of the GOAT of baseball broadcasting on the date 8/2. 8.2 and the date 8/2 both hint at 8 divided by 2, which is 4. And so the 8.2 hints at 4, and the date 8/2 hints at 4, which gives us 44, which hints at the 44th president Antichrist. Also 8/2 hints at 8 times 2, which is 16, which is 4 times 4, which also hints at the 44th president Antichrist. And so the 7th strongest earthquake connects with 370 days, which hints at 3 sets of 7, which in turn connects with the predicted prophetic sign involving President Trump with 3 sets of 7 days. All right, Vin Scully was the GOAT of baseball broadcasting, greatest of all time. GOAT is Antichrist symbolism. And he is known for having, in a broadcast, explained the term GOAT, which was considered to be cute by the mainstream media because he is a GOAT. And in this broadcast, the way he was explaining it was in terms of Michael Jordan, the GOAT of basketball. Later in that year, both of them, Michael Jordan and Vin Scully, both received a Medal of Honor from the GOAT Antichrist. Vin Scully is known for having a son named Michael, which is hinted at through Michael Jordan, that died in a helicopter crash. This is the reason for this connection in this trail of signs, one reason, to the day it is predicted that NASA's helicopter will crash on Mars. The death of Vin Scully is in fact a helicopter sign. And again, the crash of NASA's helicopter on Mars will symbolize when the Archangel Michael will throw down the dragon from heaven to earth, which is why Vin Scully, the GOAT, his son is named Michael, and he died in a helicopter crash, because helicopters symbolize the dragon. the date that he died was 8/2, August 2nd, which hints at the number 82. And it was 370 days after the 8.2 magnitude earthquake. The reason why this is relevant is also because 370 days hints at 3 sets of 7, and the earthquake was the 7th strongest in U.S. history in the 49th state, and 49 is 7 times 7. In the book of Joshua, there is 3 sets of 7, which is the reason for the prophetic significance of 3 sets of 7. And the walls of security collapsed on Jericho after the 3 sets of 7 due to an earthquake. But the 3 sets of 7 is precisely also, more specifically, 7 and then 7 times 7. Because the Hebrews marched around the walls of Jericho for 7 days. And then on the 7th day, the 7 priests blew 7 trumpets. They marched 7 times while 7 priests blew 7 trumpets. So it's a 7 and then a 7 times 7 accurately, specifically. And this is also parallel with the Omer count in Leviticus chapter 23, which is a 7-day count followed by a 7 times 7-day count in between the Feast of First Fruits, or the Feast of Unleavened Bread and Passover, to the Feast of Pentecost. Okay, so this connection is really profound, as we can begin to see here. This Omer count of 7 and then 7 times 7 is in Leviticus chapter 23, and the goat of basketball wore jersey number 23, as did the goat Antichrist. And the number 82, which is hinted at here, is the 23rd semi-prime number. And that's why 82 here. That's why 8.2 in the magnitude of the earthquake and its connection to the date 8/2 is because 82 is the 23rd prime number. The 23rd semi-prime number. A semi-prime number is only divisible, besides 1 and the number, by a non-composite number. In other words, a prime number. So the number 82 is divided by 2 and 41, and both of these numbers are prime numbers. And so that's why it is a semi-prime number. A semi-prime number is divisible by exactly 2 prime numbers. 41 is the 13th prime number, and as was explained, it is symbolism for the Antichrist, the number 13. There are 2 antichrists described in the 13th chapter, and this is 2 times the 13th prime number. But so 82 is the 23rd semi-prime number, which is also hinting at the Antichrist. And the number 7 is the 4th prime number. And so the strongest earthquake, this earthquake in the 49th state, is hinting at 7 times 7, which hints at 4th prime number times the 4th prime number, which hints at the number 44. And that would pair with this 23 days. And Vin Scully, who's talking about the goat that wore jersey number 23 and was awarded the medal by the president that wore jersey number 23. This is why 23 days after the death of the goat of baseball broadcasting that had a son named Michael that died in a helicopter crash, was the day of the NASA photo of the day, which was the space lab by China, the Red Dragon, and the crash of NASA's helicopter is symbolism for Michael throwing down the Red Dragon onto the red planet, Mars. And the day of that sign, as was explained in the diagram, on August 25th, is in turn 227 days, which is the 49th prime number, 227. It is 227 days to the date it is predicted that NASA's helicopter will crash on the red planet Mars on the date 49, which hints at 49, and quite possibly will be the 49th flight. And so the 49th flight on the date 49 connects with the 49th prime number, 227 days, and then connects back, as we can see here, to the earthquake in the 49th state. Now, in turn, as was explained in part 1 of this video series, from the day it is predicted that NASA's helicopter will crash, it will be 82 days to the predicted date of the death of the 49th U.S. Vice President in a plane crash in her Air Force Two. Connects with the 49th flight of NASA and its helicopter. And so this 82 days is part of this trail of signs that leads through the date 8-2 and the 23rd semi-prime number to the date of the earthquake that was 8.2. And again, as was mentioned in part 1 of the video series, the number 82 also hints at the 82nd word in Strong's, or the Hebrew Old Testament Concordance, which is the word to fly. And so from the flight of NASA's helicopter, it will be 82 days to the flight of Kamala Harris, the 49th Vice President, connects with 82 days to the flight of the 49th flight. And so there are flights, and that's why the 82 days connection also. And it connects to the earthquake in the 49th state, which was 8.2, which is confirmation of the 82 days connection to in between the 49th flight of the helicopter and the death of the 49th Vice President in a plane crash. And this is why Vin Scully, the GOAT of baseball broadcasting, died on the date 8-2. It's because he had a son named Michael that died in a helicopter crash, which was a flight. His name is Michael because through the death of Kamala Harris in her flight, she will be replaced with Michelle Obama, and Michelle is the female version of Michael. Now, the death of Vin Scully on the date 8-2 also connects profoundly to the date that NASA's helicopter will crash, the predicted date. And again, Vin Scully is a helicopter sign because his son died in a helicopter crash, and his son was named Michael, and the crash of NASA's helicopter will symbolize Michael, the archangel, throwing down the dragon from heaven to earth, and helicopters symbolize dragons. But from the date 8-2 in 2022, the day of the death of Vin Scully, it is 250 days, which is 6,000 hours, which is also 360,000 minutes. And again, 36 is 6 times 6, but also 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. 36th triangular number is 666. The last number in the 36th row is 666. And 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way up to 36 equals 666. This number of days and 360,000 minutes is also 21,600,000 seconds, which hints at 216. And 216 is 6 times 6 times 6. And the Antichrist was born on the 216th day of the calendar year. And so from the earthquake, the 7th strongest in the 49th state, 3 sets of 7, it is 370 days, 3 sets of 7, to the day of the death of the GOAT of baseball broadcasting, which in turn connects with this anti-symbolism numbers that I just explained, to the date it is predicted that NASA's helicopter will crash on the red planet Mars, which will be an extreme Antichrist sign. It will be the red dragon in Revelation chapter 12 sign. After Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, she will be replaced by Michelle Obama, who will then later be replaced by Barack Obama after she becomes the president. Michelle is the female version of the name Michael. And this is a main reason for these connections that go through the death of Vin Scully, who is known for having a son named Michael that died in a helicopter crash, and why Vin Scully explained the term GOAT in context of a story regarding Michael Jordan. The number 9 is the most important number in God's picture of signs, big picture of signs, as from the Bible it symbolizes God's judgment, and the number 90 symbolizes this. And from the death of the GOAT of baseball broadcasting, it is also 90 days to October 31st, the date that's already been explained a number of times, the day of the National Transportation Safety Board report regarding the helicopter crash in Hawaii. This 90 days from August 2nd pairs with the 23 days from August 2nd, which was just explained. And again, God pairs the numbers 9 and 23 to point to the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 in high school and became president in 2009, and the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist described in Ezekiel chapter 9, which involves 23 chromosomes. Also, this date, October 31st, as was explained, is 23 weeks exactly to the date it is predicted that NASA's helicopter will crash. And so this 90 days pairs with the 23 weeks, which confirms each other. In other words, the 90 days connection confirms the 23 weeks connection to the prediction of the date that NASA's helicopter will crash. Also, as was explained in part 1 of this series, October 31st, 2022 is exactly 23 years after Egypt Air Flight 990 crashed and killed 203 people, which hinted at 23. Flight 990 pairs with the 90 days here, but also this 23 years connection pairs with this 90 days connection, which both lead to October 31st, which confirms the signs and connections. The GOAT of basketball, Michael Jordan, and the GOAT Antichrist wore jersey number 23. As the GOAT of baseball broadcasting was explaining the term GOAT, the batter, player number 24, hit the ball off of the pitcher on the pitching mound for a single that was fielded by the outfielder, player number 3, which hinted at the upcoming third term for the GOAT Antichrist that will be defeated on the Temple Mount in 2024. Also, the score in the game at the time that the GOAT of baseball broadcasting was explaining the term GOAT, and at the time that outfielder player number 3 was fielding the ball, the score was 3-0. Which is more confirmation that the GOAT Antichrist will serve a third term. Also at this time that outfielder player number 3 was fielding the ball when the score was 3-0, this happened in the third inning of the baseball game, which is a third witness to the prophetic relevance of this number 3 that is confirming a third term for the GOAT Antichrist. This is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required, and this is what makes this true and not a product of one's imagination, and what makes it different and unique than everything else on the internet that is claiming to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. Another confirmation is that the score 3-0 hints at 30, and in the Bible, 30 years is symbolism for a king, and this is symbolism in this sign for the Antichrist king, which again is also the reason for the pitcher in this sign, because pitchers on the pitching mound are symbolism for the Antichrist king on the Temple Mount in the end times. Also, this pitcher that is Antichrist symbolism with his number 22 jersey, the pitch count at this time was 42. He had thrown 42 pitches. In Bible prophecy, the number 42 is associated with the Antichrist. And in the Old Testament, and arguably in the prophecy in the book of Revelation as well, this number occurs in context of slaughter of people. Also, 42 is 6 times 7, which hints at 67. And again, the prophetic sign here is Vin Scully talking about or explaining the term GOAT. And he is a GOAT because he broadcasted for 67 years. And so this hit during the time that Vin Scully, the GOAT of baseball broadcasting, was explaining the term GOAT by the batter, because of the batter who had encountered the GOAT of basketball in a shoe store. This prophetic hit by this batter was hit off of this pitcher, player number 22, which is Antichrist symbolism because he's on the pitching mound, and everything that I've explained so far, this is an Antichrist sign. And again, the ball is lost in the outfield because the outfielder can't see the ball. This is symbolism for the deception from the Antichrist. And the Los Angeles Dodgers also hint at the fallen angels, but the Dodgers also hint at dodging, because the name Dodgers originates from when the Dodgers played in Brooklyn, and at the time of the new technology of trolley carts and trolley trains, and so people perceived them as being scary. This was new, and so it was scary, and so anyway, they were said to dodge these trolley trains. Anyway, that's the origin of Dodgers, but the symbolism here is those faithful of God that will dodge the Antichrist, escape the Antichrist in the rapture at the time that the dragon and his angels are thrown down from heaven to earth. As they are thrown down, God's faithful go up. That's the symbolism in the Los Angeles Dodgers. Anyway, this hit was hit off of the Dodgers pitcher, and it was hit by player number 24, the player that had encountered the GOAT of basketball in the shoe store, for which the GOAT of baseball broadcasting is speaking about during the time that he hit this hit. And this player's number is 24. Also, arguably, the name San Diego could be symbolism for the faithful of God, because it's San Diego is saint, right? So God's saints will be raptured. So anyway, the reason why his number is 24 is because all of this, as I'm explaining, is Antichrist symbolism, and furthermore, Antichrist on the Temple Mount symbolism, and the Antichrist will be vanquished from the Temple Mount in 2024, and the rapture will be in 2024, and that's why this hit was hit by player number 24. And it's perhaps worthwhile to emphasize once again that this date that this occurred was the date 4-4, which in itself confirms that this is a prophetic sign, because it hints at 44. God has used 4-4 dates, a number of them that connect with each other, including, for example, this 4-4 date connecting, as I explained earlier, with exactly 66 years to the prophetic 4-4 date, 4-4 in 1950, when the UN Trustee Council officially recommended that Jerusalem be made an international city, the biggest transgression against God in Bible prophecy, which will be about when the Antichrist-led United Nations makes Jerusalem an international city. The 44th president will lead this. It will be a part of this. He will be in Jerusalem. One thing that should probably be added to this Antichrist sign is the fact that this game is played against San Diego, which is Catholic symbolism as well. And the first Antichrist, because there are two of them, is Pope Francis. And God absolutely hates Roman Catholicism. That's not to say that he hates Catholics, all Catholics, or Catholics in general, but he hates the pagan Roman Catholicism religion, which is Antichrist. Also, what further confirms the significance of the location of the two teams, this being San Diego and Los Angeles, both of these teams I've now demonstrated the names of the cities are prophetic in this sign. And this game is between these two teams from California. And California is the 31st state to join the Union, and God has demonstrated in many other signs that this is symbolism for Isaiah chapter 31, which begins with, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt," and Egypt is Antichrist symbolism. Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, persecuted the Hebrews as slaves in Egypt, which is symbolism for the Antichrist and the persecution of God's people in the world. Egypt symbolizes the world. So anyway, this is Antichrist symbolism because it is the 31st state, and Kamala Harris, or the Antichrist, will rise to power. Barack Obama will become president again after the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash, and her plane will be on its way to the 31st state. It will be a symbolic going down to Egypt sign. Obama is the basketball president, and he wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school. The 22nd president was the only president to serve non-consecutive terms, having skipped the 23rd presidency of President Harrison. Likewise, Barack Obama, who wore jersey number 23, will serve non-consecutive terms after the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash. The number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, as from the Bible, it symbolizes God's judgment. From the Bible, the number 23 also symbolizes God's judgment, and 23 is the 9th prime number. God pairs a certain and very limited number of numbers together in his true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, in order to develop his big picture of signs. His true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required, which is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and what makes it different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. If we think about it, the simplest way to provide second witnesses to confirm things is through pairing a certain limited number of numbers together. God frequently pairs the numbers 9 and 23 together to serve as second witnesses that confirm the signs and connections and to point to Barack Obama. One reason being the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 became president in 2009. Another reason being the only grandfather-grandson presidents were William and Benjamin Harrison, the 9th and 23rd presidents. This is why on the day of the historic first flight of NASA's helicopter on Mars, on April 19, 2021, Kamala Harris visited an electric bus company in High Point, North Carolina, to promote her and Biden's $2.3 trillion infrastructure and jobs package. This was exactly 9 years after U.S. Vice President Joe Biden, in his Air Force Two plane, made an emergency landing due to a bird strike in California, the state that Kamala Harris represented as senator. This 2.3 trillion hints at the number 23, and thus this paired with the number 9 in this 9 years connection to the 2.3 trillion. In the most central prophecy in the Bible, in Daniel chapter 9, the timing of the arrival of the Antichrist is after a symbolic 69 weeks. In this same prophecy, the timing of the coming of the Christ is also after this period of 69 weeks. Exactly 69 weeks before Harris was in High Point to promote 2.3 trillion was Christmas Eve and Christmas morning in 2019. The news reported that there were an uncanny 9 earthquakes in California in this 24-hour period. This is why exactly 69 weeks after these 9 earthquakes in California, Harris promoted 2.3 trillion on the 9th anniversary of Biden's emergency landing in California, the state Harris represented. Kamala Harris is of South Asian Indian descent, and on the same day as these 9 earthquakes in California, the state Kamala Harris was representing at the time, a South Asian Indian American died in Muir Woods National Park when he was hiking and an old-growth tree fell on him. In the Bible, fallen trees is symbolism for spiritual death, and this national park gave this national judgment symbolism. This one death of a South Asian Indian American hinted at the death of Kamala Harris. According to the statement put out by the Marin County Sheriff's Department, it was 23 minutes from when the 911 call came in to the time that the Indian American was pronounced dead. This 23 minutes was for the purpose of pointing to the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 that will replace Kamala Harris after she dies and become president. This 23 minutes in the national park in California pairs with the 9 earthquakes in California, and God pairs the numbers 9 and 23 together to confirm the signs and connections and to reveal the identity of the Antichrist, the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 and became president in 2009. Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. Barack Obama's name in Hebrew means lightning from heaven. Barak is the word for lightning. Bama is the word for high place, which in the Bible is a metaphor for heaven, as, for example, in Isaiah chapter 14, it is said that Lucifer fell from the high place, a metaphor for heaven, and in Aramaic, the language Jesus would have spoken, the word for from is O. Hence, Barack Obama is lightning from heaven. This is why Kamala Harris visited an electric bus company in High Point, North Carolina. Electricity symbolizes lightning, and High Point symbolizes high place, which symbolizes heaven. And so her visit to an electric bus company in High Point symbolizes when Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven, which is exactly what will be symbolized when Kamala Harris will fall from the sky in a plane crash and then be replaced by the Antichrist, Barack Obama. She promoted $2.3 trillion in High Point on the historic day of NASA's first helicopter flight on Mars. From the date that NASA's helicopter flew for the first time, the first ever flight on Mars, on another planet, and the same day that Kamala Harris was in High Point promoting her and Biden's $2.3 trillion infrastructure and jobs package, it is exactly 600 days, which hints at Noah. The age of Noah was 600 when the flood judgment began, and so that's what 600 symbolizes here. And this is also 2 times 300 days, which hints at 23. This is also very relevant because, again, it gets us to this October 31st date, which is all about the number 23, because as you will recall, this date is exactly 23 years after 203 people died on Egypt Air Flight 990. And this date, October 31st, is exactly 23 weeks to the date it is predicted that NASA's Mars helicopter will crash on Mars, which, as again I explained earlier, connects with 82 days to the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. This exact 600 days connection is judgment warning symbolism. God gave Noah the judgment warning before the flood came, and this leads, as I just explained, to the extremely prophetic judgment warning sign that will be the crash of NASA's helicopter on Mars, which then leads to the date that it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, which will lead to the rise of the Antichrist, the 44th president, the basketball president, through her replacement. God pairs the numbers 23 and 44 together to confirm the signs and connections and to reveal the identity of the Antichrist, the 44th president, the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 in high school. On the date 7/7 in 2022, we received a number of very prophetic signs, which I can't explain here, all of it, especially the retirement of Boris Johnson, which is explained in other videos, his official announcement of his retirement or stepping down. But anyway, this date 7/7 hints at 7 times 7 equals 49. And on this date, there was a massive explosion on a pipeline next to Harris County. And Harris is the 49th vice president. This is ultimately connecting to and pointing to the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash due to an explosion of her engine. And that's why this a prophetic explosion at Harris County on the date 7/7, which hints at 7 times 7 equals 49, and she's the 49th vice president. The date of this explosion connects with 276 days to the date it is predicted that NASA's helicopter will crash on Mars. 276 is one of 3 unusually specific numbers in the Bible, and all 3 of these numbers are triangular numbers. 276 is the 23rd triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 23rd row is 276. And I've already explained many times already in this video series the prophetic significance of the number 23, and so that's what makes also the number 276 prophetic. But also, the number 276 occurs in context of a shipwreck. The helicopter is a form of aviation craft, Mars's helicopter. But as I've explained, God pairs 23 and 44 together to confirm the signs and connections. And that's why this 276 days follows the date 7/7. And the date 7/7 is preceded by this connection of 444 days to the day that the 49th vice president touted the 2.3 trillion infrastructure and jobs package. So the 2.3 trillion hints at 23 and pairs with the 444 days, which hints at the basketball president who wore jersey number 23, the 44th president. And in turn, the date 7/7 connects with the 23rd triangular number, which pairs with the 444 days. And so as we can see here, we have this beautiful, elegant connection from the first ever historic flight of NASA's helicopter on Mars to the date it is predicted that NASA's helicopter will fly on Mars. Furthermore, crash on Mars. And furthermore, the date that it first flew was the day that the 49th vice president was in the news. And as I explained, it all tied together. And it connects to this date 49, which hints at 49. And it very well could be the 49th flight for the helicopter. All right, this is the end of part 2 of this 4-part video series. If you found the information in this video to be interesting, and I assume that you did, you will want to watch part 3 and 4 of this video series. The information will continue to build on itself and become more and more amazing. The information is also extremely important. Make sure you watch parts 3 and 4. Part 3 is under a different title. Part 3 is titled Prediction Revelation chapter 12 sign equals NASA's helicopter will crash on Mars on April 9th. I will leave a link in the description box below this video to part 2. Please leave a like and a comment on this video and share this video everywhere with everyone you know and everywhere in social media, and don't stop sharing it. And if you are Christian, know that it is your obligation to share it everywhere you go. Ezekiel chapter 33. The watchmen that don't warn others of what God is communicating is coming. God will hold them responsible for the sin of others. The link to part 3 of this 4-part video series will be in the description box below this video. Once this prediction has come to pass, you should know that you need to watch every minute of every video on this channel and read the homepage of the website trumpprediction.com or harriscrashprediction.com. Time is running out, and if for some reason you don't have enough time to watch all of the videos on this channel, I will leave a list of the most important videos in the description box below this video or on the homepage of the website. In terms of God's prophetic signs and knowing what God is doing, after having watched this video, you are now one of the most informed people on the planet. The question is, what will you now do with this information? And how many people will you help get this video to? Keep on posting the link to this video everywhere in social media. And if you would like the PDF file for the flyer I hand out on busy street corners, place on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put in mailboxes, please contact me at darrenjacksinbox@gmail.com. In my opinion, every single believer, unless they have a health condition, should be doing something like this in the streets every day. Also, everyone should have some of these flyers in their pockets, handing them out as they go about their daily business, when they walk from their car into the bank or to the grocery store. As they walk up and down the aisles of the grocery store, hand them out to people. I personally don't know what someone is thinking if they are not doing this. And if someone thinks that they are too shy to do this, what I have to say is get over it. Courage isn't a lack of fear, it is action in spite of it. And God wants us to be courageous for him. Keep in mind Jesus' parable of the 10 bags of gold. The bags of gold represent our abilities and opportunities, and the servants represent Christians. The knowledge in this video and the knowledge of the Lord's timing is a bag of gold. The Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold was banished to hell. The Reformed, Lutheran, Calvinist, once saved, always saved theology that says that a Christian doesn't have to do anything is false and is deception from Satan. And believe me, the reason why God has given me a voice through these predictions is to prove what I have just said. Make sure you watch the 23 church signs video on this channel. Also keep in mind Ezekiel chapter 33. But if the watchman sees the sword coming and does not blow the trumpet, so that the people are not warned, the sword comes and takes any one of them, that person is taken away in his iniquity, but his blood I will require at the watchman's hand. If you choose to not do anything about the information you have learned in this video, in other words, tell and warn others about it, it would have been better for you to not have learned this in the first place. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. The Pope is the first of the two antichrists. Catholicism isn't the Bible and isn't Christianity. There will likely be a massive Mary ghost that the whole world will see, but it will be demonic deception. Praying to Mary is praying to demons. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. All of the supernatural experiences that Catholics experience that confirm for them that Catholicism is true are demonic deception. The same applies to all other false religions and New Age spirituality. In 2 Thessalonians, it says we get the deception we ask for. In other words, it is foolish to rely on spiritual or mystical experiences, and those that do are asking for demonic deception. The supernatural highs from yoga and meditation are demonic deception. They are the counterfeit Holy Spirit. There is absolutely no New Age or collective consciousness type of explanation for how these predictions were known ahead of time. They were known ahead of time through Bible prophecy and watching for God's prophetic signs. Jesus was not just another supposed enlightened master like the supposedly enlightened Buddha. Jesus was God incarnate, and he is the only way to eternal life and to God the Father. The New Age religion and new spirituality is in truth worship of the self. It is transgression of the first commandment, and it is the height of false idolatrous, false God worship. We are not God. We are not part of God. God is holy, which is a Hebrew word that means separate from. The big deception in the end times will be New Age spirituality, and this satanic deception will merge with Catholicism. The purpose for these predictions, the reason why God has given me a voice through these predictions, is to prove the things that I am saying. The New Age religion is deception from Satan designed to keep someone in their pride and for repenting for their sins, and for admitting that they need to be forgiven and that they need a Savior, Lord Jesus Christ. New Age religion is essentially atheistic spirituality, and New Age spirituality and New Agers are essentially narcissistic, immature children that are rebelling against a disciplinary father. Contrary to what New Agers and Muslims say, the Bible has not been tainted or changed. This is a lie from Satan. There is no evidence for this. and in fact the evidence is overwhelmingly to the contrary. There is a spiritual reality behind the material world that we see. The wages for sin is death. Sin means to miss the mark. No one is good, all have sinned. Because of sin, people are captives of the ruler of this world, Satan. People's souls belong to Satan, whose power over people is death. God took the form of a man, Jesus Christ, and paid the ransom that is owed to the ruler of this world. Through Christ's death and resurrection, he defeated sin and he overcame Satan's power in death. It is through Christ and his Spirit that it is possible for everyone to be forgiven of their sin, and we can have eternal life if we choose it. We can choose to follow Jesus out of captivity from sin and Satan, or we can choose to reject this and remain a slave to this world, sin, and to Satan. If one rejects Jesus Christ, after they die, they will pay the price for their sin in hell, and then they will die the second death, and their soul will cease to exist. Believing in Christ means much more than simple intellectual agreement. It means to repent of sin and completely commit one's life and become a willing slave to Jesus and his kingdom. Jesus said we need to be born again, which implies a death of the self and a death to this world. Believing in Jesus implies living out one's faith through taking action that typically involves risk and sacrifice. This demonstration of faith through action is what it means to have faith and to believe in Jesus. Some Christians will tell you otherwise, but they are deceived and they ignore countless passages in the Bible. Obviously, when these predictions come to pass, you will know that you should watch all of the videos on this channel, beginning with the videos that are linked to in the description box below this video. I strongly recommend not going through the videos on this channel in random fashion, selecting titles that may be interesting, but rather I strongly recommend following my recommendations that are listed in the description box below this video. This channel is not a daily or weekly update on the latest news. Rather, this channel is a library that has documented God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. Hopefully you at least found this introduction video to be interesting, and if so, please leave a like and upvote the video, and please consider sharing the video. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com, or PredictionsProveIt.com, and also check out the other information that I have linked to on the website. You should also pause this video right now and make a note of my other social media outlets. You never know when you will need them, and you might not be able to find them later. Also, if you want to download these videos as podcasts, I now have a podcast channel at Podbean, which is named Predictions Prove It.